everyone to the meeting of the Gambling Act 2005 Licensing Subcommittee on the 28th of May 2026. I'm Chanel Wickenden, Senior Democratic Service Officer, and I'll provide support to the committee. The meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's website. I can confirm that all individuals who wrote to the Council with representations were invited to take part in this meeting. The first item on the agenda is to elect a chair for the meeting. Can I ask members, are there any nominations for chair?
I would like to propose Councillor Pugh.
Is that seconded, please? Thank you. Then I declare Councillor McHugh is chair for the meeting.
Thank you. So welcome to this meeting. I have to first tell you about what to do in the event of a fire or an emergency. You should leave by that door there, which also has a refuge for anyone that might need help evacuating further. Okay, but hopefully we won't have that. I'm first of all going to ask everyone present to introduce themselves in turn and state their role today. Let me see, we'll do members first, then we're on to officers, then applicants, responsible authorities and interested parties. So in terms of members, we're the councillors, we're the decision makers today. My name is Christine Pugh, which hopefully the sign says, and I'm chairing this session.
I'm John Abbott, I'm a councillor.
Sarah Booth, also councillor. Officers, Michael, Asita, Gillian, Chanel and Ellie. Michael?
I'm here.
Yes.
I'm just observing today. Thank you.
Yes, great. Asita?
Yes, hello, Astor Ranatunga. I'm a barrister and advising the committee today.
Thanks, Gillian.
Gillian Anderson, Manager for Licensing and Registration Services.
Sure.
Chanel Wickenden, Senior Democratic Service Officer, taking the minutes from me.
Honey? Thank you. And applicants, Andrew.
Good morning, Andrew Woods. I'm the solicitor for the applicants.
Right. Gavin Trusted.
Gavin Trusted.
Ben Trusted.
Ben Trusted, one of the directors of Future Legend.
Right. Anna.
I'm the compliance officer for Future Legend Limited.
Thank you.
Councillor McHugh, they've just had a request that they can't hear down at the end.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I can bellow. So we'd all better speak up. So that those applicant responsible authorities, John Elliott.
Yeah, PC John Elliott. I'm representing Bedfordshire Police, and I'm also the police alcohol licensing officer.
Great.
Good morning, John Killick. I'm the sergeant for the Ops Planning team. The Ops Planning and Licensing team.
Thanks, Tom.
Good morning, everyone. Harmesh Bogle. I'm the executive director for Children's Services here at Leadenhall Borough Council.
Great.
Hi, I'm Ian Brown. I'm Deputy Director of Public Health for Borough Council.
Morning, I'm Sarah Stevens. I'm the Manager for Community Safety, Resilience and Flood Risk at Borough Council.
Thanks. And if we take the interested parties in the order you're seated.
I'm Councillor Paul Edmonds. I represent the Castle and Newham.
Hello, I'm Councillor Lucy Bywater. I also represent Castle and Newham.
I'm Councillor Andrew Spice. I represent Wixons and Wilson Ward, but have a portfolio for planning, prosperity and economic growth, including Bedford and Kempston Town Centre.
I'm Teresa Bland. I'm a member of Bedford Arts Society and an ex-teacher, a retired teacher, I should say, and I'm here to object.
I'm Reverend Anthony Davis. I'm Vicar of St Paul's Church, which is the town centre church, and the site lies within St Paul's Parish.
Thank you very much. So, declarations of interest. Do we have any interest to declare? No. And the applicant. So now we move on to item 4. Application for premises license, and I'll hand over.
Thank you, Chair. Just to briefly address you on the procedure for considering this application. The committee have read the papers which have been submitted, and you don't need to repeat everything in those papers when you address the committee. The procedure is set out as Appendix A of the agenda in full. Shortly, the licensing manager, or Gillian Anderson, today will speak to the officer report. We'll then hear from the applicant, that's Mr. Woods, and any witnesses that he chooses to call. There will be questions after that presentation from the licensing subcommittee, any interested parties, responsible authorities, and any clarifications from me. Then we'll hear from interested parties with questions which follow after that in the same but slightly different order. And then finally, responsible authorities, including the police. Just to emphasise, there should be no interruption of people when they seek to address the committee. The chair and committee will take such steps as are necessary to exclude anybody who is disruptive to this committee hearing. And finally, there is the opportunity for a brief summing up by the applicant after having heard all of the representations. I think, Chair, it's down to you if you want to limit the time that address you on. I'm aware, I think the applicant said they want up to an hour to address you.
That sounds like too much.
I won't need an hour now.
No, that will be way too much. Even half an hour, Mike.
Half an hour max, but I'm hoping to do it in 20 minutes.
Great.
20 minutes?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
I'm in your hands. That's the procedure.
Great, thank you very much. So if we're all clear on procedure, over to you, Gillian.
Okay, good morning, everybody. The licensing subcommittee has been asked today to consider the application for a new premises licence under the Gambling Act 2005 in respect of Future Leisure Limited at 19 Silver Street, Bedford. The application was submitted to the authority on the 23rd of March. During the consultation period, the authority received representations from both responsible authorities and interested parties. And in accordance with the legislation, the application has been referred to this committee to determine. The objections are detailed in the committee report pages 186 to 231. I think you've all introduced yourselves, so I don't intend to go through who's objecting. The Gambling Act places a legal duty on licensing authorities to aim to permit gambling insofar as it is considered to be reasonably consistent with the licensing objectives. The effect of this duty is that licensing authorities must approach their functions in a way that seeks to regulate gambling by using their powers. For example, powers to attach conditions to licenses to moderate its impact on the licensing objectives, rather than by starting out to prevent it altogether. The licensing objectives are preventing gambling from being a source of crime or disorder, being associated with crime or disorder, or being used to support crime. Ensuring that gambling is conducted in a fair and open way, and protecting children and other vulnerable persons from being harmed or exploited by gambling. In line with the guidance and the policy, the authority requires applicants to undertake a local risk assessment when applying for a new premises licence. And that risk assessment will consider whether the premises is in an area of deprivation subject to high levels of crime and disorder, the ethnic profile of residents in the area, demographics in relation to the vulnerable groups, and the locations for services for children, such as schools, playgrounds, etc. The local risk assessment should also show how vulnerable people, including those with gambling dependencies, are protected. In determining applications for premises licence, the Act explicitly sets out two principles that licensing authorities should not have regard to. Section 153 makes it clear that in deciding whether or not to grant a licence, a licensing authority must not have regard to the expected demand for gambling premises that are the subject of the application. Section 310 of the Act states that in making a decision in respect of an application, a licensing authority should not have regard whether or not a proposal by the applicant is likely to be permitted in accordance with law relating to planning or building. It should also be noted that as per the guidance and policy, moral or ethical objections to gambling are not a valid reason to reject applications for premises licenses. Licensing authorities should not turn down applications for premises license where relevant objections can be dealt with through the use of conditions. The applicant has submitted a revised local area risk assessment following receipt of the objections, which has been circulated to all parties. I would ask the licensing subcommittee to make reference to the guidance for licensing authorities and the authority's statement of gambling licensing principles when determining this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So if there's no issues with that, we'll pass over to the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. As Gillian has said, this is an application for a Gambling Act 2005 premises licence. These applications can and often get a number of representations, which are generally held beliefs and views, often perceptions on what might happen, what may happen if the premises open. And what I propose to do in hopefully under 20 minutes is to explain how the applicant will deal with those concerns that are relevant to the Act. You have Mr. Ranatunga advising you, and Gillian has set out the principles of the Gambling Act, so I don't need to go into too much detail on that. The Gambling Act is a different approach to a Licensing Act alcohol application. It's a different approach to planning. And it clearly is not an approach which everybody approves of, but that is the approach that I'm sure you will take as guided by Mr. Ranatunga. In my case summary that I sent in, I've made submissions with regard to the legal approach. I've referred to another case that Future Leisure were involved in recently, which I referred to briefly, and all of those are in the case summary, so I don't propose to waste time going through them today, but just for the record, that's where these submissions are made. This is an adult gaming centre, strange term. An adult gaming centre does not allow under 18s into the premises at all. It has a range of gaming machines for adults to play, thus the strange name. The stakes and prizes for those machines are set by law. They're not set by the applicants. And the maximum stake is a £2 stake. So compared to, say, a casino or even a betting shop, the maximum stakes that can be played in these types of premises are smaller than in other gambling premises. There's no counter in an adult gaming centre. One of the key aspects of the gaming centre is that the staff are positioned on the floor. So they, as soon as the door opens, they will be analysing and assessing customers who come in, particularly with regard to underage, but also with regard to a wide range of vulnerabilities. The average stake in one of our premises is 30 to 40 pence, the average age about 40, and is generally a mix of male and females who go into the premises. This is an average sized shop. If this permission is granted today, there'll be 40 machines or thereabouts and 30 handheld tablets, which all offer a different range of games, but the stakes and prizes are prescribed. Some customers, just like you go into a restaurant and prefer one meal to another, some customers prefer one machine to another machine, but the actual money you put in is prescribed by law in any event. And there is prominent signage on age verification and receiving help if you have gambling problems. There are two machine shops in Bedford, both operated by a national operator called Merca, and they both operate 24/7. And having read the representations, that there is no evidence that those shops cause any of the problems or concerns that have been referred to by by those who've made representations. The applicant, vastly experienced, it's a family business, father at the far end, Ben, head of ops, sitting next to me, Anna in the middle, head of compliance, has been there for many years. We have 15 other shops. The nearest, we don't operate in Bedford, the nearest is Northampton. We operate, all of our shops are licensed to operate 24/7. Company is Gambling Commission approved, and we have a significant range of policies and procedures, all of which promote the licensing objectives, and all of which the Gambling Commission are happy with, and all of which, in the recent case in December involving Haringey Council, the judge was satisfied as to the level of experience, the detail in the policies and procedures, and the detail in staff training. So the licensing objectives are promoted through the measures set out in the local area risk assessments, the policies and procedures that we have in place, the staff training that Anna runs, and the experience and expertise of the family business. The family do not want any of the concerns that have been referred to come to fruition in their premises, and work very hard to ensure that that doesn't happen. If they did happen, which they don't, they would potentially lose their Gambling Commission license. It means they wouldn't be able to operate any of their shops. It is a highly regulated business. I understand it's not everybody's cup of tea. It's not what everybody wants to see at times, but please be assured that it is highly regulated, and the operator, Future Leisure Limited, will ensure that all of the highest standards are in place. None of the concerns or beliefs that have been expressed in the representations occur at any of our shops. So our evidence to you is that we promote the licensing objectives in all of our shops through the measures that I've set out in the local area risk assessments and the policies and procedures. So I would ask you to accept as evidence that that is what Future Leisure will do if you are kind enough to grant this application. And again, in my case summary, I've referred to various findings made by Judge Brennan in the Haringey case about the company. Obviously, cases are different, and that doesn't necessarily mean that one case is granted, so another has to be granted. But the judge found that this is a vastly experienced operator with policies and procedures in place, which he was satisfied with, and he was satisfied that they will promote the licensing objectives. The initial local area risk assessment, as Julian has said, we are required to undertake one. That was 165 pages. I don't know if anybody has seen many local area risk assessments. It is an incredibly detailed local area risk assessment. It assesses risks, and importantly, it sets out all the measures that will be in place at the premises to promote the licensing objectives. There was some criticism of bits being missed out in terms of an assessment of the area. So the applicant has taken those on board and has submitted an amended local area risk assessment, understanding what everybody is saying about the area. There isn't a huge difference, but some of it is a question of interpretation. But that information has been very helpful and taken on board. And all of the measures, which clearly I don't have to repeat, are all set out in the local area risk assessment. That local area risk assessment also takes into account your statement of gambling policy, which was issued in January 2025. And page 8 deals with information to go in the local area risk assessment. Page 21 deals with adult gaming centres and age verification and self-help, etc., etc. And all of those are in there. You forgive me for noting that on page 4 of your policy, you specifically say in January 2025 that there are no problematic areas in Bedford. And that will presumably have been after research and consultation with other authorities, maybe some of whom are here, I don't know. But that was a finding. There are no particularly problematic areas in Bedford, and that's obviously in terms of gambling, and you keep that under review. So I submit to you that the application is consistent not just with the licensing objectives, but also with policy. Reference is made in the representations to deprivation in the area and deprivation areas close by, which Anna in particular has considered in the local area risk assessments. Whilst we haven't operated in Bedford before, we obviously have local area risk assessments in all of our venues, and we operate in areas which, if you're statistically scoring them, which I hate doing but needs to be done for evidence, some of those areas are statistically more deprived than the area we are seeking to be in now. And the only reason I mention that is not to try and score any points at all. It is to say that we operate in challenging areas in inner London, such as Ilford, such as Haringey. They're obviously different to Bedford, I fully accept that, but operating in challenging areas with the family experience, the policies and procedures, the local area risk assessment, the staff training, and the measures that we have in place, we promote the licensing objectives. And more importantly, the concerns and worries that the local people are expressing to you do not come to fruition in those other shops. The evidence that I would ask you to accept is that the evidence that we promote the licensing objectives, comply with the policy and comply with the codes of practice. I submitted 3 documents for the hearing. The first is my case summary. The second was the judgment in Haringey, which I'm not going to go into in any detail. Mr. Ranatunga has that in his papers. I also submitted an independent assessment report by a company called Lavesh. They are ex-Metropolitan Police. They went into 2 of our shops in London. They were undercover, so to speak, as in the staff didn't know they were going. And they found that staff were operating to a high standard. The shops were not contributing to antisocial behaviour or crime and disorder. Safer gambling, age verifications and notices were all prominent in the shop, and there was no evidence that that crime was attracted to any of the premises. We've been through all the representations, and should we obtain a licence and then ultimately planning permission, we would of course be more than happy to liaise with those who have made representations moving forward. We understand the feelings of local people, often in terms of gambling, and I'd just like to make it clear that if we are granted, then the door won't be shut, and we'll work with the local people moving forward in terms of operating our shop. There are the 2 Merca machine shops in the city in Bedford as well, and again, there's no reference to any issues there. There's also, I think, betting offices as well, which are a different breed in terms of gambling. They don't have the staff on the floor. The stakes aren't limited as such. An adult gaming centre is a much more restricted gambling venue than a betting office, because the stakes and the prizes are all restricted by law, and we can't change that. And crucially, I would submit that despite the representations which have been made, nobody is saying that there is a problem in Bedford that those shops are causing, or those shops are not protecting. The police and Australia and I have had conversations. They've presented an objection. I've got to say there's no evidence as such in that representation that Gambling Act 2005 premises cause any issues, or that the measures in place at the existing Gambling Act 2005 premises don't work. I proposed, and I copied Chanel, but I don't know if it's made its way to the papers. I proposed 9 conditions to Mr. Elliott, and I'll just summarise those very briefly. And if they're not available, I've got a copy here. So those conditions include CC.
if you have a copy, could you please pass?
Shall I give it to Mr. Ranatunga? I'm just going to read them
Yeah.
out so that people are aware what they are. But I
You can I just check? This was sent to
it was sent
Chanel.
to, Chanel was copied in, to be fair. I don't want to put Chanel in. The 22nd of May at 17:17, I copied Chanel in. I want to be very open. I didn't specifically say put these in the papers. It was an email to John proposing conditions, and I just copied.
Okay, if you tell us it and then.
CCTV throughout the premises, 31 days.
Sorry.
CCTV cameras.
Keep it for 31
Keep it
days.
31 days. All entry and exit points going into the premises, there's just one entrance. You'll be able to get frontal identification of everybody coming in from the CCTV. All public areas will have CCTV covering them, and as part of the planning application, which we haven't made, there'll be a CCTV camera out on the front door outside as well, which we'd be happy to liaise with the police over. Challenge 25 and rules on what we accept. Prominent signage on Think 25. There'll be a magnetic locking device on the front door, which won't be locked at all times. But if ever there's antisocial behaviour outside, not connected to us, the staff can lock the door, and they'll only let you in if they're happy that you're allowed to come in. That's in all of our other premises. A suitable intruder alarm, an incident log recording incidents and refusals. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. the maglock will be in place, so you have to buzz to get in. And in this site, having read the representations, we are proposing that we would have 2 members of staff on duty at all times. We don't have that in all of the sites. We often run the morning with one member of staff. But we've read the representations and concerns, so we are happy to commit as a condition to 2 members of staff at all times. I think Mr. Elliott's position is that if the application is granted, he is happy with those conditions. Ultimately, of course, as Gillian has said, conditions are a question for you if you are minded to grant the application. But there are 9 proposed, which for the record, and Mr. Elliott is here, the police are happy with. In a way, in heading towards conclusion, you have evidence and concerns from those who have made representations, and we'll hear those evidence and concerns in a minute. The question is whether this application promotes the licensing objectives. And the judge's comment in the Haringey case, and again, obviously this is a matter for you, but I would invite you to the view that this is the correct approach. He said, I accept that there are 40 points, and Mr. Ranatunga knows it well. I accept there is evidence before me from public health and other people, accepting that there are individuals who may be vulnerable, both in terms of age, homelessness, mental illness, gambling problems. But what is absent is actual evidence that this applicant and this shop will not promote the licensing objectives because of the measures and mitigation they have in place. So yes, there is a factual assessment of the area from those who are making representations. They obviously know the area far better than I do. And yes, they are producing evidence of concerns about what happens if this shop is allowed to open. But my main submission to you is that for all the reasons I've said in terms of experience, staff training, policies and procedures, and all the measures in place in a very detailed local area risk assessment, I would invite you to the conclusion that this applicant in this shop promotes the licensing objectives, promotes your policy, and promotes the codes of conduct, codes of practice, and the Gambling Act 2005. The applicant has put in place measures. It takes on board the representations. It will, should this application and planning be granted, work with locals and will show to the locals if the shop is allowed to open, that those concerns, whilst genuine, will not come to fruition because of all the measures in the paperwork submitted and all of the submissions made. And then that, councillor, is my submissions on behalf of the applicants.
Thank you very much. In 19 minutes. Wonderful. Yeah, thank you very much. So questions, first of all, from the subcommittee, then interested parties, responsible authorities and legal and licensing. I have some, but do you? Okay, I'll go first. So what, from the paperwork, so we've all read the paperwork, from the paperwork, your other shops, or at least the ones in Haringey, they operate as, they're called Royal Casino Slots, is that right? So what's the intention for the name of this premises?
It would be the same trading name.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't look on Street View or anything for the appearance. What's the general appearance? How much sort of permeability is there, opacity, in terms of your appearance?
What would you have in the window?
Can answer. Yeah, so we operate a different style to the likes of the other two shops in the town, which are the Mercor shops. They're more completely closed. We don't do that. Ours are more visible through. We have advertising screens in the windows, so it's an active shop front. And we might have some decorative screens behind those advertising screens, but otherwise it's we like to let light through. We like to make it more visible. That's how we do our shop.
And there are several doors on the plan. Even as Clinton Cards, if I were Clinton Cards, I wouldn't really like that double door down the left-hand side. How are you going to operate with 3 doors? What's the flow going to be, especially since you would have two members of staff?
Yeah, we were planning to operate with the one entrance. So it's a I understand from the previous use there was multiple doors, multiple entrances. We were looking to operate with the one entrance on the corner side, and the one entrance with the doors there.
So the others would be fire escapes. So
Right.
what facility is there for smoking and vaping for customers and staff?
It's not permitted inside the shop.
So do they go out the front
They'd have
to
to go,
smoke
yeah,
and vape?
yes, yeah, correct.
Can staff go out the back?
No.
No, okay. Where do you anticipate the customers will come from? So just thinking of public transport. Our public transport has recently been slashed. So people can't get late night buses into town. People can barely get a daytime bus into town. So I'm imagining that the customers will be very local. What's your take on it?
That's correct.
Very local. I did want to ask about the number of staff, which has been answered. And how many people, so at say one of those Haringey premises, how many people might be refused entry or asked to leave in a week?
Difficult to say. I think it's different for every shop. I think it's different for every town.
What would it be in a sort of trouble-free area? So one of your averagely performing, does it happen every day that somebody's asked to?
No, I wouldn't say that. Say that technically.
Well, when it comes to Challenge 25, there is a matter we had recently a verification test in every single shop. They all pretty much pass. So
Yeah.
we've got the recordings, but it's being put as pass. So even though it might look like it's a refusal, it's not, because these people were over 18, but they have been challenged and we've got evidence that that has been recorded. We've got a little bit more customer interactions because the staff is prompt to speak to every customer. So not every customer interaction is designed to say that a customer has got a problem gambling or some sort of issues. We I also say to them, you need to speak to a customer so you know who they are. And this is for knowing the customer, but also for anti-money laundering and crime perspective. So to know the customer, who they are, where they come from, whether they local, where they work, sort of. So we seem to have quite a lot of customer interactions, but they might be positive and obviously a negative if the customer is showing a problematic behaviour.
Yeah,
But
I think in the conditions, was one of them about logging problem thingies. So presumably once in a while at your facilities, a customer, you feel that they are having an issue and you might say it's time to go.
So I didn't go into too much in the case summary, but as Anna has said, the staff are required to undertake interactions with customers, and that might be good morning, how are you? Customers been there for 30-40 minutes, it will be detailed than that. Those have to be recorded, and if the staff are not happy, as in they feel the customer is vulnerable, or they feel the customer's been there too long, then that customer will be offered help in terms of self-help, but will also be prevented from playing if the staff are not happy.
Thank you. So I think, is it true to say that even in the amended Lara that you have missed out the Bedford School accommodation?
I don't know if Anna can remember whether it's in or not.
it is, and and it's also a student accommodation, the boarding school is mentioned.
That's what I meant. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
The boarding school is mentioned.
in the amended.
The amended version.
Student accommodation.
We'll have a little look at that. And
I'll pass it to Anna and see if she can find it.
Don't worry, we can search.
Okay.
We can search, but then if you're not happy with our answer, then we'll schools.
That's right.
Student accommodation section. Yeah, not under the student accommodation. Under student accommodation, it simply says no purpose-built student accommodation.
No, that we haven't it.
That's on page what page 30 of the PDF. Maybe students you were thinking plus 18 plus.
Also provides boarding accommodation.
Yeah.
It's on page 30.
Yeah, it's not in the table. Okay, so it's mentioned in text, but it's not in that table. On
It's
page
not in the
30.
table specific.
Yeah.
It's a student accommodation.
Okay. And you mentioned the our statement of gambling principles stating there's no whatever document or evidence problem with gambling. You might also be aware that last year we did renew the cumulative impact zones and even extended one of them in its scope. And obviously you'll have read all of the stuff about action on ASB. So I think it may have been a very narrow comment in the statement of gambling, but your premises are gambling.
Well, the cumulative impact zone, I think,
for
is Licensing Act 2003.
Yes.
And of course, there is no alcohol
Yes.
sold or permitted in this venue.
Yes.
So I was just reading your policy.
Yes, absolutely. And one final one for me for the time being, the 9 conditions proposed. It seems to me all of them except maybe the 2 members of staff, and 1 member of staff would have been alarming, frankly. It seems to me all of those conditions are probably your standard operating procedures anyway. Would that be fair?
Some of them
really
certainly,
additional.
yeah, some of them certainly would be, but we've had this discussion before. Over the course of years, Future Leisure have developed what they were based on experience, a significant number of measures that is now automatic at their venue. So when they first started trading, they might not have mag logs, they might not have CCTV in as much detail, they might not have intruder alarms. So yes, we do that in every shop, but I would suggest that doesn't mean it's just average because we do
It's
it.
evolved. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I understand your point, yes.
Yes. That's it for me. Would you? Okay, John.
Yeah,
One thing you flagged up there, you say you tend to operate in challenging areas. Why do you operate in these challenging areas, particularly the location you picked is very close to food banks and we've got accommodation for the homeless in the area. I'd just like to sort of understand why you do that. Why don't you pick more prosperous areas?
Well, the starting point, because obviously I ask this question every time.
Yeah.
The starting point, what we're surprised here, is fairly simple.
Yeah.
If it's a busy area with high footfall and with a range of other shops nearby that customers would go in, then that's the starting point.
Yeah.
That's the point. It isn't a detailed demographic analysis. You know, I'd like to say Ben's better than this, but actually Bedford town centre is busy. There's lots of shops there that our customers would use. And that's why we chose Bedford and the other busy areas in London. It's driven by will there be customers, will there be footfall?
Yeah,
is what drives it, not the demographics.
Okay, thank you. And obviously you've mentioned one of your primary way of protecting the vulnerable is through staff interactions. But how do your on-floor staff identify customers who may be experiencing I'm deaf in one ear at the moment, so I can't hear how loud I am. So I'll start again with that. Sorry. So obviously you say your staff interactions, your primary way of identifying and protecting the vulnerable adults who come into your shop. So how do your on-floor staff identify customers who are experiencing hidden financial harm? Because they might have just come out of the local food bank. How are you dealing with that? And at what point does your polite conversation become a mandatory refusal of service? Because you're in an area where people potentially will be accessing the food banks. So, living is going to be very difficult for them, and they might have a thought in their mind that actually this is a way to try and make some money, as people do in that instance. So how are your staff trained to deal with that? And be useful to understand the training your staff get generally, because you say your staff are the key part of your business to identify people. So what robust training do your staff get, and so how often do you refresh it as well?
I'll let Anna deal with the actual when the training takes place.
Yes.
But in terms of assessing customers, that's done by a number of ways, and I always need to be polite when I'm saying this. The first one is obviously a visible check on the customer. What does the customer look like? Does the way the customer is dressing or looks, does that cause any concern at all? I always need to be careful not to be disrespectful at all, but a customer who doesn't look dressed correctly would be refused entrance for those reasons. And then there's age verification. Once that initial assessment has taken place, then it's all driven by the customer behaviour and how the customer is behaving. So the initial staff interaction will be, good morning, how are you? To look into the eyes and check that there is a rational, sensible response. And then the staff will watch the customers on the gaming machines. And if there is any erratic behaviour, if there is expressions of dismay or concern, if there is anything that doesn't show a customer relaxed and playing a machine, then the staff would intervene. And those assessments are continuous throughout. So they would also look for signs of vulnerability, which again is how the customer is behaving, physical look, etc., etc. And then the interaction will take place. It has to be recorded. The number of interactions also has to be sent to the Gambling Commission every quarter, who make sure that interactions are taking place. And if the staff have concerns, then the customer will not be allowed to play. And I know that seems contrary to running a business, but the alternative is they lose the license. And so, Anna, could you, if I'm a new member of staff, not the detail, but how often am I trained and refreshed?
So the trainings, I'm providing the training every 3 months. They also have an extensive test that they need to fill out, and it's not based on you can choose what answer it is. They actually have to write it down the answer, so I know they understanding is correct. I also do, or I'm trying to do every 6 months, audits. So they actually writing the test with the questions in front of me. We've done it every 3 months recently, and it came out quite well. When it comes to the assessing customers' behaviour, so I understand your concerns, and because I have those concerns as well. So apart from the behavioural signs that they've been trained to look for, whether it's extensive time spent or more months have been deposited, or the customer is getting a bit more aggressive or anxious. I also train them to look for the deeper signs when a customer might not be really too sure how to play the machines, or they don't really know how long they've been in the venue, or they're not being as communicative as before with them. We also doing the KYC, which is called Know Your Customer. So they are able now to track the customer whose behaviour has changed over time. So like you said, the financial difficulties. So somebody might be okay for some period of time, and they may perhaps develop some problems. They will be able to say, because each customer has got a profile, so they will be able to say from the customer journey whether their behaviour has changed. So I'm doing a customer interaction review every week, and a Gambling Commission recently have come out with effectiveness of the interaction. So we're doing the effectiveness, what works for a certain customer and what doesn't. That's why we offer regular breaks to customers. We do have to ban them. Some of them, if you can see that there is no way of helping them out, obviously the support services are being offered. But if you see that customer is getting worse, we do give them a ban for, let's say, 2 or 3 months if they don't wish to self-exclude.
Okay, thank you for that. So could you give me some examples of successful interventions you've had in your shops? Because I'd like to know, actually how this has happened. Give us some reassurance.
Yes. So we've had a customer called Billy in one of the locations, and he's been actually saying that he's having problem, not financial problem, but he seems to be getting more and more time coming into the premises. So staff has advised him to take a regular breaks every 2 hours, although he doesn't usually spend more than like kind of 3 hours in the venue, but every 2 hours, and then stop for half an hour. But what they did for him is to oh my God, sorry, what was that? Got a bit stressed out. Offer a timer, that's it, on the screen. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. So they offered him a timer on the screen. So they said every half an hour there is a message coming up, a timer, half an hour.
Just following up what Anna was saying, just to help answer the question.
Yeah.
Our machines, there's sort of technical standards coming to these machines now where they have to have limit settings on the machines, and we can advise, we promote the staff to steer customers towards that if we feel that that's what is necessary for.
Right. And do you know how many self-exclusions occur annually across your business, so across the shops you've got currently? Do you keep a record of that? Because obviously you've got people self-excluding, they're coming in saying to you, you stop us, coming in gambling. Do you know how many you have across your estate over the year?
Yeah, we have to declare that to the Gambling Commission every quarter.
Yeah.
Now. And I don't have to think of the last quarter to have done. It does. But if not, 40 across the business.
It's 50. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That's for a quarter.
Yeah. So we can extrapolate roughly across the year.
Right.
Yeah. And that's also across a number of shops. And just, if you've got your repeat vulnerable customers coming in, what are you doing to monitor them? What support are you giving them to, ensure that they don't end up in a financially critical condition through using your machines?
Well, we don't allow vulnerable people in our venue. That's to be clear, that's why Anna's just explained all of the training that we have. All of the customers are closely monitored from whether they are regular or new customers. They are regularly monitored from the second they walk through the door. That's what we have all the training for. That's what we're prepared for.
But when your business is up and running in an area, what's your sort of percentage split between new customers or repeat customers? Do you see a big churn, or do you tend to see regulars coming back on a?
That's a good question. I think that it's different for every town.
Yeah.
You know, we generally cater to local communities. You know, we offer service, you know, a leisure service to people local to the area. I think it's fair to say that it changes. I don't think we can give you a straight, you know, answer in terms of whether it's one or the other. It changes through the time.
I mean, your nearest location is Northampton. I would say Northampton and Bedford are reasonably similar, both county towns, both a bit further away from London. So do you have an idea of that for Northampton? Because I would use that maybe as a baseline to, you know, consider Bedford, because it will be different to your London establishment. So do you have an idea of, you know, the split between new and returning customers in your Northampton branch?
The Northampton branch is due to imminently open.
Oh, okay.
So I'm trading at this point, but
Yeah.
it's by the end of next month. So the idea is that this is part of our expansion. And as we say, the two venues will kind of work in tandem in some respects in terms of staff covering and that kind of thing. So we'll take experience from Northampton and Bedford, and experience across all of our other venues to do the best job we can. But obviously, Northampton is a different town. Bedford is a different town.
The nearest venue I'd say of ours would be Stevenage.
Yeah,
we've been operating there since 2018. In terms of just going back to the question about vulnerability and self-exclusions, obviously we have to report all of that data to the Gambling Commission on a quarterly basis. How many interactions, how many self-exclusions, and obviously if they felt that there was an issue with that data, they would no doubt, it would be, you know, it causes a problem. It would cause a problem across our entire business, because the license issued by the Gambling Commission is overarching across all of our venues, so it's not specific to each site. So if there's a problem in one, the overall operating license is put at risk.
Obviously, your local area risk assessment, very comprehensive, 165 pages long. But what Bedford specific risks were identified? Because this might just be a wonderful template you have, looks amazing, and we can look at 165 pages and go, flip an egg. But so what did you identify particularly for Bedford be the potential risks within that?
Tested our memory on 150 pages.
Well, you wrote it, so
it's all in there. But I'm sure Anna can.
There is
this one.
Obviously, it's a detailed document. Off the top of your head, is there anything that stood out? Anything that's different?
There will definitely always be a challenge.
And
that's why I always be in place high. One, because they're not allowed by law in the premises, staff has to be trained on challenge 25, obviously be very cautious when it comes to children. And two, because they all also are vulnerable.
So just out of interest, is that a specifically Bedford thing you've identified? So I imagine there's children everywhere.
Not specifically Bedford, no, but because Bedford is a town city area, so they, you know, it's very busy, like Andy said, it's got a high footfall. So Bedford as a Bedford don't have a specific high risk, because vulnerability will always be everywhere in a very high footfall and busy area, especially town centre location. So I understand that this is challenging areas, as Andy said, because it is busy and it's a town centre. But we have identified the risk, and we understand the challenges. We've got the mitigations in place that have been working across all of our venues. They are location specific, so there is obviously the measures are much more extensive, but in the table I try to do them as specific as I could, down to the actual location, to the specific risk.
I think also the thing that stood out, and it's in some of the public health reps, that, you know, the specific areas of deprivation stood out. but they do stand out. It stood out in Bedford, but they do stand out in other areas as well. So I think if there was two things, as Anna said, it's the number of children, the ASB on the street generally, and the deprivation areas that are referred to. Yeah, probably those three things. If you're asking for three things.
Okay. One final question on that, Lara, is what events would trigger an immediate review of it? Because you say you review it on a regular basis, but what sort of thing would cause you to have an immediate review?
It will be a local crime. So if the crime goes up, so we do check crime very often, not only in the local gambling risk assessment, but also in loan gambling risk assessment. So even though we are proposing that we're going to have 2 members of staff, we still do the loan welcome risk assessment and health and safety risk assessment.
Yeah.
So we do this on an ongoing basis. There will be the vulnerability crime bulletins. If something happens, obviously, so we do information and crime. So the risk assessment is always being changed. Other than this, every 6 months we do I always review the local gambling risk assessment. Me as a compliance officer, I very often visit the area and do a spot checks on the on our staff members, asking them questions, see what's around. So me being very often in the actual location, you will see what's happening, whether there are any changes, whether anybody is loitering outside the premises. So this is when we do.
Obviously, we had this obviously representation from the police about the crime within essentially within the town centre. What Bedford specific crime risks did you identify? Apologies, can you hear me? What Bedford specific crime risks did you identify? And that's really specific to Bedford rather than other areas.
Not really, no.
Okay.
Ilford, Hackney, they are quite similar.
Thank you. That's me. I'll be quiet now.
So my colleagues have covered quite a lot of the questions that I had. I was just wondering, is there a maximum time for customers to be in the store? And alongside that, while I appreciate that the machines that you have are relatively low stake, if someone was playing on a £2 machine for 10 hours, then that obviously becomes a much larger stake. So are there any maximum stakes that customers can place in any 24 hours or in any given period?
So the maximum stake for a single bet is £2. But that ranges down from 20p to £2. And obviously, just probably go to your question of time. That all comes into the interactions that staff do with the customers. So we wouldn't see anywhere someone spending that, the figure that you picked there, 10 hours in a venue. That just wouldn't happen. Because that's why the staff are trained to interact, log the interactions. So now I say, for example, then that staff member might be changing shift. Well, it's all logged on the tablet. The new staff comes in, they have a handover. That staff member then checks through that tablet, so they know everything that's going on in the venue at all times. And those customers would be interacted with after time spent in the venue.
So there's no, are there any controls on how much someone can spend in any given period of time?
In terms of how much they can spend in any period given time.
I get that, you might have someone who's a multimillionaire who seems quite flush who can manage that, but we know that people who potentially do have gambling problems can often present as though they don't have gambling problems. And so, even their nearest and dearest may not know that they have a gambling issue. So they may come across as someone who is flush, is happy to be spending the money. So are there any controls on sort of any kind of given limits on how much someone can spend in any particular amount of time?
There isn't a specific limit, but if a customer is in there for a certain amount of time, inquiries have to be made as to where the money is coming from. And if you go to the extreme, the staff would have to ask for evidence from the customer that they have that, they have the money to spend and spend within their means. But I think generally customers will not be in there for the length of time that you mentioned. I appreciate it.
Well, I mean, it could be a short amount of time. If
Yeah,
someone's
well,
got £20 in their bank account, but they're in there for 2 hours, that may not seem like an excessive amount of time. But if they've then gone through the £20 and then into overdraft on their bank account, that's still a big problem for someone who hasn't got the means.
No, I understand what you're asking. That they're obviously interacting with as soon as they come in, but then after 30 minutes, they're off. They are asked to take a break.
Anything else? No, you answered all right. Okay, thanks. So we can have questions to the applicant from other people firstly from the interested parties, then responsible authorities, and then legal and licensing. So any questions? Lucy.
Thank you. Thank you. There's been a lot of detail, which is really helpful. I am heartily reassured. My first question is, what's the average age of your door staff and your staff inside the building?
Staff inside the building, inside the premises. I'll be honest, it really varies. Could be as low as maybe mid-20s to up to as high as maybe early 60s.
So 25 is the minimum age.
There's a legal debate you can't have a staff member.
You can't have a staff member,
working in a gambling business that's under the age of 18.
And so is 25 minimum age?
Well, if you're asking what would the range be, the range would be somewhere in that region from 25 to 60. But all staff, I mean, if a new venue opens, it would open under the guidance or the stewardship of an existing manager, would be drafted in from another venue who's experienced. You know, we can't. The Gambling Commission wouldn't allow us to just bring someone in for an interview, give them 10 minutes training, and say, there's the keys. You know, it's quite a lot more involved than that. We would have to have an experienced manager, probably running the venue for at least 6 months, providing training in conjunction with Anna to any staff that would be, you know, they would be there. Manager or managers would be there at all times.
And I asked that question because there is such a high level of antisocial behaviour in the town centre that many other businesses experience aggression, violence. I mean, shoplifting obviously wouldn't affect you. And so having young people working there, especially difficult to challenge people, asking them to leave, for example. Most other businesses don't have to engage people in that way.
Sure.
So,
we don't put our staff at risk, you know, in any of the London boroughs in which we operate. You know,
every staff in the shop has a staff form. So if there's any concern at all, the staff can press a button they hold, which will alert the management and security team to it. The people sitting next to me have CCTV images of the shop on their phone at all times, so they can access that at all times and call for assistance if need be. And the front door, unlike an average shop, the front door can be locked. So if there is something happening outside unconnected to the venue, then they can just lock the front door and not let anybody in. So there's a lot of protection for staff through the security measures in the shop.
So my next question sort of leads on to that. It's about when someone is having a challenging time, they've been in your premises for some time, they're challenged and asked to leave, or there's some engagement with them and they're directed to leave. If they are made to leave, there may be aggression, there may be frustration because they've just lost a lot of money and they were hoping to make that back and they've lost that opportunity. They may be in the red, as Councillor Abood has suggested. So there may be anger and frustration, which is what I'm trying to say. Sometimes that can manifest itself in aggression towards people outside or to property outside. Do you sort of record that at all? I appreciate what you're saying inside the building, but immediately outside the building, which affects the rest of our population, our residents, is there any way of addressing that, or do you record that? If someone leaves shouting, swearing, threatening to do you record that?
It will be recorded in the incident book in the venue. if there was a concern that the customer, and this is a hypothetical situation, which from all of my experience with this company actually doesn't happen very often, if at all, but let's answer the hypothetical question. If there is a concern about the customer being ejected, then the police, we'd notify the police, but the staff are not allowed, they wouldn't be allowed to go outside and deal with an incident outside. So we deal with it as Tesco's or any other venue would. We'd eject the customer, we'd record it in the incident log, and if there was an ongoing concern, we'd call the police.
There was also a log that I suppose Merkel has it as well. So if we do the recording, or if perhaps if there's a concern about the customers, the nearby premises will also get it. So they will know what customer it is and what was the situation. So it's kind of a sharing information in between with nearby premises, which is quite helpful.
Thank you. In terms of the advertising screen, so a lot of the gambling premises obviously have we're called dead frontage sort of vinyls, and not much indication to people who are not familiar with game centres what they are. They might even sort of be invisible, but if you're having advertising screens, obviously that's very engaging and almost perhaps interactive. Would you agree that sort of repeat exposure sort of normalises gambling and is more likely to attract?
No, I think it makes it very clear what the venue is. It would be much more dangerous if you had a blank canvas when people could just walk in wondering what it is. It's very clear that this is a gambling premises, that you have to be over 18 to go in. So the information provided on the front makes it very clear what it is, and it would be dangerous to do otherwise.
So what kind of thing would be displayed on those screens? Is it pictures of the games and pound signs, or
Correct.
trying to
Images of the games and
That's it. No under 18s, safer gambling messages. That's basically
all and any advertising is again subject to regulation by the Gambling Commission. So we can't do anything that doesn't promote the licensing objectives.
Thank you. And then my last question for now is, you said we don't have vulnerable people, and that's based on obviously the measures you take and the staff training. But that's obviously not always obvious, is it? I mean, with the best will in the world, I'd say, and with the best level of training. And also, I mean, we take that as a fact that you can't always identify who someone's vulnerable. They may not be carrying a sleeping bag or barefoot. We know many of those people in town. But they're also, because we have a number of other venues, if you are to understandably send them out, they have so many other options to go to. So their vulnerability continues because there is just such a concentration nearby. But I think there are 6 different sorts of gambling venues, including gaming centres within 500 metres. So they could just happily, not unhappily, I would say, circulate to other venues, and the vulnerability is amplified. And the more of these venues we have, the more that is amplified. Would you agree that that's an issue that can't
the requirement for this company and this application is for us to promote the licensing objectives and protect the vulnerable to our best, the best of the ability of the company, and that's what it does. I mean, if somebody is showing signs, say, of mental health issues, then the person wouldn't just be asked to leave. The company, the staff would try and help them. If there's somebody showing other issues, they wouldn't just put them out into the street and leave them. Basic human behaviour would make them try and help those people. But in terms of ensuring that vulnerable people don't play, the requirement is for this company to do that, and that's what it does.
Thanks. Are there any other questions? Teresa, Andrea, and Reverend Davis. Andrea.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to ask my son, I think it's kind of been touched on, but just to get further clarification. So what is your plan on working with the other gambling facilities in the town to prevent one person going from one to another? For example, if another venue has identified a problem, showing vulnerable behaviour, or they've been gambling for too long, etc., and that customer's been asked to leave, but then they come to you, so they're a new person, how do you prevent facilitating this access?
So it comes back to the tablet that we were talking about, we keep referring to. So it's a multi-operational self-exclusion scheme. It's run by a company called IHL. We're all a part of it. So if we log an incident, that then goes to the neighbouring gambling establishments. And same as they do. If they log something, we get that notification as well.
Is that instant?
So
Instance.
correct, yes.
Yes.
Okay, and so I think I might be confused on the term because it says self. So that's not the person self, that's you as a business self.
It will be both. Yes. So if we exclude somebody or if somebody self-excludes, we put it on the system that operates between the other gambling premises and it alerts them that this is what's happened. And if they do, it alerts us that's what's happening.
How do you report self-exclusion? So if I self-excluded myself, do I come in and tell you I've excluded myself?
You might do, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Or you might do it in the shop. So one of the managers might have a concern about you and say, no, I've got a, I'm not sure what I should be doing. The manager would say, well, there is a self-exclusion scheme. Do you want to self-exclude? That would be a good idea if you've got concerns about gambling here or anywhere else. So you might do that yourself and we would record that.
And then if I put myself on that list, is that forever?
The time can be set.
Okay.
But if you then came back in and the manager, as Ben's been trying to say, we have customer profiles.
Yeah.
So if you came back in and let's say you self-excluded for 6 months and you came back in 7 months' time, you wouldn't be allowed to play until the manager had sat down with you and talked to you about it.
Okay, thank you. And then if there are no formal time limits on how long people can stay, I appreciate that you give them breaks from the machines. So 2 questions, I guess. When they have a break in the machine, do they have to leave the premises? And what mitigation are you having for the risk that if the minimum stake is only 30 to 40p, that it becomes a warm, dry place to stay at night, given the 24-hour operation? So I'm not necessarily talking, as we referred to before, shoeless sleeping bags, but people that just don't want to be in their homes, that are going to gamble very slowly at 30p a stake, but stay there all night. How are you going to manage that?
That wouldn't be allowed.
So have you got a formal time limit?
It would be obvious what would be going on, and that would not be allowed. The staff would not let you do that.
Okay.
And as Ben and Anna have mentioned, that after 30 minutes, somebody would automatically be spoken to, and then every 30 minutes they would, and then there is an assessment at that time as to whether that customer is happy to gamble and the shop are happy for those people to stay in the shop.
Okay, so then if they are on a timeout, do they have to leave the premises? They actually physically have to leave.
Correct.
And what's their sort of average time that their timeout? Sounds like a sport. Their timeout is.
Yeah, that's so different. Across the 15 venues that.
But typically, is it like go and wander around the streets for 15 minutes and come back, or is
No, not necessarily. Could be that they go home and they come back the next day, or they go and we don't see them for a week.
But do you enforce that limit?
Yes, we promote it. Yes,
Okay, so you tell them don't come back for a week, or
we
whatever.
promote whatever's necessary to the customer at the time.
Okay, and then do you have, even if it's only a vending machine, do you have sort of like food and drink provision in there?
We offer refreshments. Yes.
Is that paid for refreshments or is it Vegas style refreshment?
There's no burgers and beers. You might get a cup of tea and a cup of coffee and a biscuit.
Yeah.
I'm not sure
Not quite big, but yeah, that's the same and the same as the other event in the town.
Okay, and do you have, because obviously 18-year-olds are still sixth formers, and we're very much aware that there is schools around the borough. We have a lot of school children that hang out in town. I'm not suggesting that school children are antisocial by any stretch, but do you have any policy on, say, school uniform in your venues?
We operate the Challenge 25.
But Challenge 25, they can still be 18, can't they?
They can be 18.
But they'll be a sixth former still, so they could be in their uniform still.
Have you ever had a uniform?
I don't think I've ever seen in
I don't know.
We've never
any
had
years of
anybody in a school
operating,
uniform.
never had any school uniform in any of.
I mean, you'd expect me to say this, but these premises are not attractable to younger people. 18, 19-year-olds. There's no music, there's no alcohol, there's nothing in there. I don't want to sell the place down. There's nothing in there apart from playing on a machine. And 18, 19, 20-year-olds are not attracted to these types of premises.
It's not like a closable, amusement arcade where you have rides and games that might be attractive to under 18.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Reverend.
Just to try and clarify a little bit further how much money people could stake. So you said you don't have a monetary limit on how much people can spend, but they get charged every half an hour, and that you have a maximum stake of £2. How many times in half an hour could someone stake £2?
It depends, depends on, I suppose, how much money they come into the venue with, whether they go to get a coffee or they go to use another.
If someone was gaming
Okay.
for a full half an hour,
Okay.
without getting a coffee, which doesn't seem unreasonable given some of the time limits that you've spoken about. How long does a game last that they require a £2 stake for?
I think by law, the spin time is 3 seconds, 2.5, 3 seconds per spin. That's what's
So there's
permitted by law.
quite a lot of 3 seconds in 30 minutes.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, that's just what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Any other questions? Paul.
Yeah, you raised the Haringey decision. But that was based on your shop actually being in it had actually been there for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And been running.
Yeah.
Running successfully, which obviously.
Yeah.
It's praise for you in there. But that doesn't apply here. What we're looking at here is basically it's a new place. Do you accept that?
I accept that, but the evidence in Haringey was extended beyond, so that was part of it. But the judge also accepted the way that we traded in other shops and that we had an unblemished record in terms of compliance and promoting the licensing objectives. So you're quite right. We've been trading there until 11 p.m. for 3.5 years. So we said we've traded here without problems. We wanted to go 24/7. People objected, as they do. We said we operate in 14 other venues 24/7. The independent Lavesh went to have a look at a couple of those venues, and they came back saying there is compliance with no antisocial behaviour connected, compliance with protecting the vulnerable, and the evidence to the judge from us was that we don't have issues because we promote the licensing objectives. So you're right in the first part, but there was more to it.
Right. Okay.
And that's what we're saying. That's what we're saying here. We appreciate everybody on the other side of the table doesn't know who we are. We've been new to Bedford, but what we're saying is that we operate in 15 different areas. We have all of these measures in place. We have concerns expressed when we go into areas, and the concerns that are expressed don't come to fruition because of how we operate.
So you accept that the committee as it stands doesn't have data for this area to work with.
Well, it has two other machine-based shops that nobody on that side of the table is saying there's any issues with, and it has our evidence that we operate in 15 different areas and promote the licensing objective, which is the test under the Act.
Sorry, just another question. Many of our licensed venues in town have door staff, which are of a standard because of the door staff training, etc.
Yeah.
You're you're having your inside staff managing your door. Would there be an opportunity because I know compared to the other two, but you're in quite a prominent position where you are now.
Yeah.
Would there be a consideration for door staff, and or what training do your staff have that make it to sort of a qualified level of door staff as opposed to staff in a shop?
So the second part of the question is, if you're not qualified as door staff, you cannot act as door staff. So they're not, the two staff that Ben has talked about are not SIA door staff.
Okay.
They are allowed to say who comes in and comes out, and they're allowed to ask people to leave, etc., etc. The first part of the question, yes, Anna and Ben and Gavin will assess if the license is granted and if we open, etc., etc. They will assess, as they do in other venues, whether there should be an SIA door staff at this venue. So that will. It isn't a no. It is let's see what we need. One, let's speak to the police. Let's see what the area is actually like, and if one is needed, then they have and will put one in.
Okay, so on go with that. If it looks as that, or if you're reviewing if it's needed or not needed, I would suggest that it's a daytime and a nighttime thing. Just knowing who sits around that corner.
Absolutely, yeah. And obviously, we'd speak to the police and anybody who wants to speak to us, we speak to, and that would be taken into account. But it isn't a no. It's an assessment that Hannah and absolutely will undertake. Yeah.
Sorry, my apologies. This follows on from Reverend Davis' question. Obviously, I've just done a bit of maths here, working out what you could potentially spend in half an hour if it's a 3-second stay. So that's up to £600 for an intervention. Are the stakes, are they cash? Are they card? Are they both? How are they placed? Because obviously you can bet quicker with card than you can, and actually you can run up debt really quickly if you're going with a credit card.
Credit card so
Yeah. Credit cards aren't put in venue.
Right.
How the venue operates and the two other sites, the local sites in the town will operate the exact same way. We actually operate the same system.
Yeah.
It's a ticket system. So you go to a basically centralized cash machine, and you deposit your credit onto the ticket. You take the ticket to a machine. You then play your credit. You then take your balance back to that machine, and it will then deposit your funds, which you can also deposit back to your card. Choose.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, because I've actually never been in one of these places. So no idea how they operate, whether it's someone literally, I remember the bloke in the pub sticking his coins in.
Yeah. So you're saying nobody's sticking their coins in and nobody's tapping their card. Yeah, but a debit card.
Yes.
You can have a debit card.
Can't directly.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Thanks. So we'll move on to questions from the responsible authorities. Are there any? Ian.
Thank you. There's evidence to show that children and people who are exposed to gambling venues are more likely to then express an interest in gambling themselves. And one of the mitigations in your detailed risk assessment is that premises will display neutral signage only, with no gambling images visible from the streets. I just wanted to understand how that is applied in the context of having EDUs in the windows, which presumably they're there to attract people into the venue. So if you could just explain that.
Oh, so if you're going to have the screens advertised, you're not going to see any of these machines. So all the machines, or whether it's going on inside, children will be able to see. This colourful machines. So obviously the advertising will cover everything from outside.
It's more to show.
So it's on screens, like I previously mentioned, you need to have all the responsible gambling. So you need to have the not under 18. Yeah,
cannot put on
so the gambling
in terms of attracting children and involvement.
How much?
Yeah, sorry. So they won't be able to see the machines,
No.
but your VDUs will be advertising them.
It will show games.
There will see games, but not the actual game.
But it is a form of advertisement for.
It's more to display what's going on inside the venue,
which is gambling.
Correct.
Yeah. That's what it needs to do, yeah.
This is an area of the town where we do see recorded incidents of mental health crisis on our streets, unfortunately. This relates to a question that Councillor Bywater had earlier, but how would you support a customer who's experiencing that kind of emotional or mental distress in your venue? And what is your sort of duty of care once they leave your premises?
Well, I think, as I said, if there is somebody experiencing clear signs of mental health issues, then prior to opening, we try and have a relationship with the local mental health group, and we would, depending on the severity, if necessary, we might give that person a cup of tea and ring the mental health group whilst that person is there. We might refer them to it, but in terms of putting somebody out onto the streets, you know, if the situation didn't require that, we wouldn't do that. We'd either call the police, we'd either call a group, and we'd try and give some help if that is appropriate.
Thank you. First one is to follow on from a question for just around the staff training. Is there anything specifically that the staff get around conflict management? I appreciate that there is a door staff, but it's conflict management part of the training.
They have an expensive separate. So this is a training that I'm not providing, but it's a separate company. I think called Plan B that's providing the conflict management and aggressive behaviour, and also drug and alcohol use. There's quite a lot of these. I think we get about 15 different trainings.
Thank you. And then just to subsequent that question have any staff at your venues either had body-worn videos to have access to, or has consideration been given to using body-worn videos?
No, it's not been necessary.
I'll raise that point, just an extra level of security for the staff that we've got, certainly you haven't got.
No, I understand.
We do implement the system. Obviously, the entire venue is covered by all areas covered by CCTV, along with the cameras at the entrance that would identify full facial image in all light conditions. And we also implement a system called Staff Guard, where staff can press a button and a control room will connect to the CCTV. They can communicate via a town in the venue.
Thank you. And then the last question I had, just again around the door staff, was have any of the venues previously we've got have used door staffs?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, great. If there are no more questions, I'm just licensing.
Okay. If I heard you correctly, there's 15 sites that you're operating, and you're proposing at this site, if you were granted the licence at Bedford, 40 machines and 30 handheld tablets.
Yeah.
How's that in comparison to your other
It's
sites?
about average. Our biggest site has 70 bigger machines and an equivalent number of tablets. So 40 machines and 30 tablets is about average.
Okay, thank you. I've just seen the conditions that you were referring to.
Yeah.
I haven't seen them before today. As you would expect from a licensing officer, I would want conditions to be enforceable.
Yeah.
So looking at the conditions, would there be agreement that you're not open if you can't meet these conditions? Because, for instance, your one on staff says there will be 2 members of staff rostered to be on duty at all times. They might be rostered, but if you haven't got 2.
So that particular condition is the bane of everybody's life around the country, because the reason it's worded like that, you've picked up on. If we have 2 members of staff on duty at 9 o'clock, and if the condition is you must have 2 members of staff and one doesn't turn up because of childcare, we can't open. So that is a condition which we have on other licenses, and it is worded like that for that reason, with an expectation, and it's a matter for that if one doesn't turn up, we get somebody else there pretty quickly.
Right. So you would still open if you only had 1 member of staff.
For as long as it took to, well, they would assess whether, if it was 8 p.m. on a Saturday night,
right,
they might take a view not to. If it was 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, they might take a view to open and get somebody there as soon as possible. But you picked up that that's the reason for that wording. Obviously, ultimately, that's a matter for the committee, but it's worded like that on many other licenses, not just for us, because the operator says, well, what if it's Monday morning and there's childcare problems, then we can't open, and we'll get somebody there as quickly as possible. But so that, yes, that's why it's worded like that.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at the CCTV one, that's worded that it's maintained in good working condition and recordings, whatever. Doesn't say you can't open if your CCTV is not working.
Well, not wishing to be a lawyer, it's a condition on the license. If we open in breach of it, we're in breach of the license, aren't we? So I would expect us to comply with that.
Yeah, I just from looking, bear in mind that I'm a licensing officer and deal with conditions on a regular basis, and from licensing premises, we would have conditions that make you do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's.
And don't allow you to say to me when I'm challenging you, that's not what your condition says.
That's the intention of these conditions. If they need tweaking, then, you know,
And I just raised that point.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
I think any conditions need to be, from my point of view,
I agree.
enforced.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I haven't got anything else, thank you.
Thank you. So if there are no further questions for the applicant, thank you very much.
Or can I just actually just
Yeah.
clarify double
Oh,
detail?
sorry.
So I take it
Oh,
from
yes, and
that,
legal.
just on the conditions.
Yes.
You'd be amenable to a tweaking of the conditions to tighten them up.
Yeah, that's a matter for the committee. Yeah.
There's mention of a risk assessed approach to SIA supervisors.
Yeah.
Would you be amenable to a condition? All of these conditions are without prejudice to the subcommittee's actual decision on this case. But if the committee were minded to grant the licence, a condition requiring a risk assessed approach to SIA
That would
supervisors.
be agreed if you're so minded, yes.
Has there been, so the conditions have been circulated to the committee, to licensing. And I've seen them. Do you have any copies available if I'm to see?
I don't. I've got them on email somewhere.
Yes, I suppose.
Could you pass the hard copy on to take it?
Yeah.
Because I don't have access to email it.
First bit is me asking somebody to print this as well, but I mean, the conditions are there and there.
I can get through you, Chair. I can ask Sunday licensing. I'll forward it and print it off.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
If I can just check then, those were discussed with the police and we'll hear from the police. Was there any discussion around hours?
The police said that they told me that they wouldn't really want 24/7. Police said, John's there, that they will maintain their objection. But I think John agreed that I could say if the licence is granted, he was happy with those conditions. Yeah.
We'll hear from the police, but what is the premises position on hours? So it's a new licence.
The application was for 24/7.
And what's the position if the committee were minded to grant the licence, but with a cutback on hours? What's your position on that?
I'm not sure I have one. So that's, you will make your decision on the evidence. I would like 24/7. But obviously you will make that decision based on the evidence that you hear.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. So we move on to representations from interested parties. Got Councillor Bywater, Councillor Edmonds, Councillor Spice, Ms. Land and Reverend Davis. So over to you, Lucy.
Okay, thank you. So obviously I'm here today as ward councillor for Castle and Newham, and town centre makes up quite a large part of my ward together with Ward Edmonds. We're asking that the subcommittee reject the application, taking into full account the immediately local context with regard to promoting the licensing objectives, because I think the local context is really, really important. So first of all, preventing crime and disorder. We'll hear from police, of course, and we have the slides about recorded crime and ASB in the immediate locality of Silver Street. High levels of community safety incidents within the last year related to welfare, crime, antisocial behaviour, and even missing persons. It's already been mentioned, the recent case of, has it been mentioned actually? The recent case of Sheffield. You mentioned that? Sheffield versus Royal Amusements. Royal Amusements had a 40-year really good record, good reputation, as your company apparently does. Their application for a gambling licence was refused. Their subsequent appeal was lost on locality-based public health and hidden harms grounds. I think that's really important to highlight. And they said at the appeal, it was said by the court, it's the locality that is a proper consideration, not merely the premises themselves or the recognisably strict controls on the premises themselves. The court held that the aim to permit duty stops short of being mandatory and does not prevent refusal where locality-based risks cannot be met by conditions. So as ward councillors, we have a particular insight into the local problems, as do local residents, faith groups, businesses. In terms of location, I do want to highlight again the cumulative effect of so many gambling premises overall in Bedford Town Centre, except that you're not responsible for the others. But these premises, it has been said, your premises would not cause problems, and your slot perhaps on the high street has not directly caused problems, using cause with a capital C, but they are part of a challenging picture in our town centre. This means that supposed sort of protective and welfare measures, such as turning customers away, trying to engage with them, offering a cup of tea, they have limited value because, as I've already said, they have other options they can go to nearby. A couple of minutes walk to the next one, 30 seconds to the next one, they can continue. This concentration has a potential impact on crime and antisocial behaviour, but also increased risks of the wider hidden harms to local people. So hidden harms, for example, sort of negative antisocial behaviour on residents just a few metres away, but not perhaps in the immediate area. The risk of higher number of nearby thefts and shoplifting, which is an epidemic in our town centre. Also the normalising of 24/7 gambling by locating the premises in one of the most prominent locations in the town centre. It's a lovely corner site there. I mean, you couldn't have a more prominent location, and with your advertising screens so that people know what's going on inside. It's a major gateway to the pedestrian centre. I can't highlight enough how horrified I was when I saw this location. It's much more prominent in terms of visibility than All Hallows around the corner, for example. Moving on to protecting vulnerable people, just briefly, because our joint report is in the pack, obviously. I'll be as brief as I can, but Future Leisure acknowledged medical risk area assessment. Some indicators of vulnerability may be present in that area, and that at least risks sorry, I don't understand what I've written there. The problem here, in my view, that there is an underestimation in the level and extent of local vulnerabilities, including indicators of deprivation of addiction. So there's insufficient attention given to the regional factors. So, for example, the particularly sensitive sites in the immediate area. Just to quote one example, the location of Dine With Us on the Streets, which many of us will be familiar with. It's a charity just a few metres away. Its entrance is opposite on Paradigm Court. Paradigm Court is a little bit hidden, but it's right opposite next to B&M. It's a local charity, Dine With Us on the Streets, that I've worked with for many years. They support individuals and families who can't afford food and other essentials. That includes very much and very obviously people experiencing homelessness, financial instability, living with SEND and with poor mental health. Again, these are all very evident to local residents. The latter are all more likely, as we know, than the average person to struggle more with self-regulation and to be vulnerable to addiction, such as gambling. They're also perhaps many of them less likely to have the facility to gamble online at home. They just might not even have Wi-Fi or facility or any kind of machine at home to do that. So high street gambling is an extra vulnerability for them, in my view. I'm aware Dine With on the Streets already have persistent problems with antisocial behaviour and unfortunately sometimes aggression involving some clients queuing outside, so that'd be very close to your premises. The charity do their best to manage this, but they often talk to me about this. Clients being aggressive to each other because of their frustration, mental health, as I've already said, and aggression even to nearby residents and to volunteers. In addition, we have very nearby the Impact Community Larder on Hawes Court, the entrance of which is adjacent to the rear of 19 Silver Street. Again, they are a charity working hard, providing food and other support and really positive signposting to those in need. And then obviously further along on Harper Street, we have 2 winter night shelters for rough sleepers, the most vulnerable in our community. So as well as underestimating this particular level of vulnerabilities in the immediate area, I think Future Leisure assume that the mitigations they list in the papers, and there are many, I accept that, they assume that there will be optimum success if these are all applied. I'm actually more concerned about the impact just outside the premises on vulnerable people and on young people and on residents and other businesses than just inside, which you claim to be able to manage with your interior controls. Your amended local area assessment submitted after the representations in objecting, as we've mentioned, it does admit high inherent risks for children and young people, vulnerable people, homeless people, mental health, and people suffering with mental health vulnerabilities, and for crime and disorder. So those are acknowledged. But I think it's very unreasonable to assume from all the evidence, we can assume that if granted, this gambling license would be harmful to vulnerable people. And from that, it would also have a negative impact on the local area in terms of increased crime and antisocial behaviour. It's very hard to see how there wouldn't be an effect. And I think even if there's only a small effect, that's not acceptable. So I would just say in conclusion, if we're to uphold the gambling licensing objectives, preventing crime and protecting vulnerable, this council, as a licensing authority, needs to be rejecting this application. There are significant concerns, as we will see, from police, from public health, from community safety, from nearby businesses, a resident, a former teacher who we'll hear from, and who's given up her time today, and also from St Paul's Church, who see the sharp end very much of the kind of problems I've been talking about. High risk location, 24/7 operation, maximising the risks. And really these risks are systemic, as I've said, they're not fully controllable by mitigation and by conditions. So as a town centre ward councillor, I ask the subcommittee to reject.
Thank you. Do we, as a subcommittee, have questions? Lucy? No. Does anyone have questions? Oh, applicant have questions? No. Okay. Paul?
Okay. Okay, thank you. I am grateful to the applicant for the additional materials they submitted, including the local area assessment, which I'll return to because it's central to understanding the issue. I have engaged publicly with the community about this proposal. However, submission today is grounded on the evidence in the plan.
Can you speak up a bit?
Sorry, I couldn't hear myself. So my voice is just gone. I had a phone some years ago. I literally can't hear myself. Okay, shall we start again?
No.
Okay. So where was I? I have engaged publicly within my community about this proposal. However, the submission today is grounded on the evidence in the share. So I just want to be clear what I said. Rejection is not. It is not an anti-gambling argument. I enjoy a platter just like anybody else. So we're not here to say that gambling is wrong, but that Bedford does not need another leisure venue, or that Future Leisure is about gambling. We accept the licensing framework, we accept the aims of the principle, we accept that the refusal must be grounded on the evidence and in the licensing objectives. The question is whether granting a new 24-hour adult gaming centre premises licence at 19 Silver Street is reasonably consistent with the licensing objectives in this specific locality, not in London or any of the Future Leisure's other premises, but here in this part of Bedford. We accept the section 153 presumption in favour of granting. We say the evidence before this committee is precisely the kind of evidence that bases it. The reason they rejected, and they have not withdrawn, they have produced a 12-month intelligence analysis covering April 25 to March 26, drawn from their operational crime and ASB databases. The findings are precise and they are specific. Police evidence identifies the immediate locality around Silver Street as a significant concentration of recorded crime and antisocial behaviour, accounting on the police's own figures for 46% plus of all recorded crime in the Bedford boundary area. 19 Silver Street is labelled by name of the police hotspots and sits within the deepest concentration zone. The existing gambling venues in the area are plotted within that same zone. The police make one finding that I asked the committee to note, well, actually, I suppose to speak for themselves, but they quote, similar adult gaming, gambling premises within the boundary area are open 24 hours between approximately 0800 to 2200 hours, which align with the peak times for offending. That is not an observation, it is a professional, not a general observation, it is a professional operation of grounded connection between gambling premises operating hours, peak crime periods at the specific site. Silver Street is in the top 10 of peak streets for antisocial behaviour in the boundary area. 22% of all offences occur between 2300 and 0359, say that 4 o'clock in the morning. The proposed licence is for a 24-hour operation. Public health have objected jointly, and Children's Services objected. They place the site in the third decile deprived area in the top 1% nationally for crime. They identify 6 gambling settings within 500 metres of the premises and 11 with 1.5 kilometres. The highest density in Durham. Carson and Union Ward has 47 gambling premises per 100,000 people, and Great Priors immediately adjacent has 88. I think the national average is something like 16, 17. Community Safety have provided many CCTV evidence incidents within half a kilometre of the site in a single year. Welfare concerns, mental health crises, missing persons, street drinking, and youth antisocial behaviour, with a significant proportion occurring at night. The committee may be asked, where is the evidence of harm from this existing gambling premises in this area? The answer is that gambling harm is by its nature hidden. It presents itself through debt, mental health deterioration, and family breakdown, not through instance in a crime lot. The absence of visible harm is not evidence of absence of harm. But these are not concerned residents, they are statutory bodies with professional expertise in exactly the harms and the licensing objectives are designed to prevent. The amended LARA submitted as their answer to these concerns. And I want to be fair to it, it's more detailed than the original. It engages with the locality, and that engagement is precisely the problem. The amended LARA accepts that the locality presents high inherent risks for children and young people. It accepts high inherent risk for vulnerable persons, for people who experience homelessness, those with mental health vulnerabilities, and for crime and disorder. It accepts proximity of the most deprived LSIAs in the borough. It accepts the risk of the venue hopping and repeated gambling behaviour across nearby premises. The applicant says those risks become acceptable with their controls if their controls applied. The controls they propose are in the main standard industry controls. Challenge identifies CCTV, staff training, self-exclusion, magnetic door lock, instant locks. Those controls may produce some risk. The committee must decide whether they sufficiently address the risk identified in this locality. The question is not whether the premises will be well run. The question is whether the conditions can address harm that is hidden, intangible, and invisible to traditional regulation. Harm may not present through obvious behaviours or trigger traditional interventions. The committee may conclude that some of the identified risks are less susceptible to mitigation through operation control alone. I anticipate it will be said that the objectives have not identified a specific missing control. That is correct. And that is the point. The objectives are not saying that the LARA is missing a specific condition. We're saying that the category of harm identified here is structural. It's not amenable to conditions of a premises licence, however well drafted. As mentioned by Councillor Bywater in February 2025, Sheffield Magistrates Court dismissed an appeal against the refusal of a new adult gaming centre premises licence. The case is Royal Amusements versus the Sheffield City Council. The operator in that case had a 40-year unblemished record, a stronger track record than the applicant before you today. The LARA had been revised 3 times. The proposed controls were thorough. The appeal was dismissed. The court said, as Lucy has already said, it is the locality that is a proper consideration, not merely the premises themselves or the recognising of strict controls on the premises themselves. And also they said, recognising that those real risks are often hidden, intangible, and invisible to traditional regulation, it is simply not possible to identify any conditions on the premises licence which would or could meet those risks. So the judgment recognised the important role of licensing authorities in considering prospective harms within the locality. That role falls to this committee today. So I mentioned Haringey earlier. Haringey was not a new premises application. It was a variation of ours at an existing premises where Future Leisure had operated without complaint for over 3.5 years. The judge had a real local operational track record before him. This committee does not. There is no Bedford track record at 19 Civil Street because the premises was never open. The Haringey judge himself said the original refusal was open to the subcommittee in the evidence before him. Their own authority confirms that the refusal was a lawful outcome from the right evidence. Bedford has materially different evidence before treating objections and local evidence that were not present Haringey. So Haringey is not a rule that Future Leisure Limited must always win. It's just a fact-sensitive judgment on different evidence in a different place. So I ask that the subcommittee refuses the application not because gambling is unwelcome, not because Future Leisure is an unsuitable operator, but because the specific premises at this specific location in this specific Bedford locality on the evidence before you from the police, public health, children's services, community safety, and the church, and from the applicant's own risk assessment is not reasonably consistent with the licensing objectives of protecting children and vulnerable persons from being harmed or exploited by gambling and preventing gambling from being a source of crime or disorder, being associated with crime or disorder, or being used to support crime.
Thank you. Are there questions from the subcommittee? No. From the applicants? No. Responsible authorities? No. Legal and licensing?
No, thank you, Chair.
No. Okay, thank you very much.
Please, I'll keep quite brief on this one. Just wanted to raise, and some of it, well, most of it will be duplication, so I'll apologise for that. The inappropriate location. The location is an inherently sensitive, introducing a 24-hour gambling venue in such an area risks increasing exposure to gambling related harm among vulnerable groups, contrary to the licensing objective of protection, as well as being located in an area where we witness daily issues all around the venue, for venues, etc., including frequent antisocial behaviour in the court behind, as well as the very local offering of shelters and food banks, bringing vulnerable people into the area. In summary, it is already known as the vulnerable hotspot. The risk for vulnerable people remains material. While the applicant proposes mitigation measures, their own assessment concludes that the residual risk remains at low, medium or medium manageable level. In a town centre location with known indicators of vulnerability, such as homeless individuals, children's schools and mental health patients, this level of risk is not insignificant and does not provide sufficient assurance that harm will be prevented. Adult gaming centres can become associated with increased vulnerability, antisocial behaviour and disorder risks, especially where there are pressures on policing and community safety. We also know from work that we have done with vulnerable residents and town centre users, you can only help those that want to be helped, and there are concerns that this facility in such a prominent venue will only work to assist personal issues. The town centre already contains a number of gambling and betting premises, as well as gambling machines in many of the pubs in the town centre. The addition of a further venue risks contributing to a cluster, behaviour is so bad, which increases overall exposure and risk, particularly for those already vulnerable. This raises concerns about the cumulative impact on both crime and disorder and the protection of vulnerable persons. Overall, it feels that the negative impact / risk of the provision in the area seems to not fit wholly with objectives despite the conditions and mitigations proposed.
Thank you. Any questions? Questions from the applicant? No. Responsible, no. Legal and licensing? No. Okay. June, respond.
Thank you. I apologise for, again, replication of stuff. I'm here to ask you to refuse permission for the proposed casino. My objections are within the Licensing Act and are twofold: the source of crime and disorder and protection of children and vulnerable people. My reasons for doing so are firstly to do with child safeguarding, in that the Mayor has granted a 10-year lease for the council-owned part of Exfields Shop to a dance school. The proposed gambling establishment's proximity would be no more than a few yards from the entrance to this school. The required local risk assessment includes considering proximity not only of the schools but also the deprivation of the area. And Bedford's score of 18.93 for the deprivation is higher than the rest of East Anglia. And it can be illustrated by the number of empty shops in the town centre, along with the vulnerable people of different natures, including children, who can be seen and heard congregating in this area of town, especially on market days and when there are street activities, as I've seen offered by the Visitor Information Centre, again, only a few yards away. As Future Leisure has highlighted in their risk assessment, the area profile, it is a busy thoroughfare for pedestrians, including children from several schools and now the dance spots as well, as the site lies on the crossroads of 4 pedestrian roads that are the centre of town, a good spot for big issue sellers and for evangelists. This site is also right in the centre of the police data's hotspot for ASB and CAP, which makes it prone to probable increase and the casino customers being likely victims. I have not a concern not only for the gamblers using the casino, but also for the staff as they are walking through this area quite a long way to get to their vehicles, which cannot be parked close by. Future Leisure cannot guarantee their safety once they've left the casino, nor can they police the opportunist criminals, possibly on electric scooters, in the large area outside. This would be an added pressure on the Bedford police. Bedford is not an affluent town, and despite some money being spent on it to regenerate parts, there are at the moment 42 empty stores on the lists of Kirby Diamonds. Major stores have been moving out so that M&S becomes B&M, and even Poundland has withdrawn. There are 2 food banks operating directly behind this shop, and the alleyway horse court is already quite a scary place for the volunteers who work there late at night. There is a recognised link between the number of gambling venues, deprivation and increased crime opportunity. Gambling is set up to give the company and the edge, so that otherwise they wouldn't be a business. Where will this new business come from in a town where really it's stretched already? The addictive nature of gambling makes no distinction between people who are losing their children's inheritance and those who are losing their children's child benefit. It is the fact that gambling affects people's health in various different ways, but whichever way it is, an extra burden on the National Health Service. There are currently no fewer than 7 gambling establishments within a few minutes' walk of the old card shop and 18 within Bedford as a whole. With gambling so readily available online as well as casinos in Luton and Milton Keynes, it seems to me that this property would be far better utilised to train the public in, say, CPR and first aid, food and eating advice or training, and even youth centre offering jobs and job advice and training, rather than offer an unrealistic idea of transformative luck. My second reason for objecting is that I'm working on a project to deliver community art gallery with artist studios and space to run inclusive workshops to include children and families, obviously, and vulnerable people in this town centre area, and have been in conversation with councillors for some time, including the Town Centre Advisory Board. Local artists are looking to me to get this important part of the art quarter implemented in the planned regeneration of our historic county town. There have been some great successes in bringing community art into the centre in the past few years, but it cannot be sustained while it's always meanwhile or empty shop windows. Should we be successful in gaining a permanent space, then Bedford's aspirations can be creative rather than destructive. Certainly the artists already working with vulnerable people of Bedford, with whom I have spoken, are very much against the casino in our town and on their doorstep. It plays no part in the Bedford cultural vision with whom I've been working. The authority's statement of licensing principles outlines the need to protect children as well as other vulnerable people from being harmed or exploited by gambling. And this includes wider protection considerations such as domestic violence, drug or alcohol dependency, poor mental health, homelessness, and debt. This makes it surprising that moral or ethical objections are not valid reason to object. Is this joined up thinking? There is a long way between requiring establishments to have policies and staff training from it being operational in any effective way, thus leading to the possibility of giving opportunity for crime and disorder. The clientele will necessarily be pedestrians, as parking is a fair distance away, meaning that they would be mixed in with young people either attending dance school, future workshops for a community art gallery, passing through on their way to a concert, or merely gathering in the town on market days and school holidays. Future Leisure estimates the risks that some are high, once mitigated at low to medium, a level that they consider manageable. Is this a risk level you would be happy to send your own young people into? They are asking an awful lot of their staff, door staff in particular, and seem to think that just by being outwardly neutral, closing its eyes, people won't notice they're there. They acknowledge that more gambling venues, to quote them, increases the likelihood of congregation, loitering, venue hopping, opportunistic crime, antisocial behaviour, repeated gambling across operators, and potential misuse of gambling facilities for money laundering or other criminal activity. I believe it cannot be mitigated beyond threat by policies and posters, and that writing a risk assessment does not make it safe. Placing it in such a pedestrian spot risks normalising gambling. I find it ironic that gambling comes under the auspices of public health. If council's reason for the casino is to increase their income, then how much will it spend to benefit people of Bedford? I urge the council to say no to a licence for more gambling in the heart of our county town, which is working against the tide for regeneration and improvement. Be creative and aspirational. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the subcommittee? Questions from the applicant?
No, thank you.
The responsible authority, legal and licensing? No? Thank you. Reverend Davis.
What I have to say will be probably briefer than some of the others. I also have come to object to the application and would like the committee to reject it in full. At St Paul's, we work with a number of vulnerable groups, vulnerable adults with presenting variously with things like poverty, addiction, mental health, precarious accommodation, all those sorts of things that by definition make these people vulnerable adults. We are just opposite Harper Square, and I walk through Harper Square most days. And I recognise an awful lot of the people that will be sitting on the benches around Harper Square, along Silver Street in front of Tesco's and things, as these same vulnerable people. So my objection comes largely down to the specific locality of these premises. Unlike many of the other gambling establishments in town, it is an absolute prime location that is placed opposite places where people gather. There are benches around Harper Square where people will sit and gather, those same vulnerable people that we serve, that the food banks serve, that the various homeless charities serve in that area. And it's that immediate proximity that really concerns me. Vulnerable people with time on their hands congregating in the immediate area. Probably the extent of that, that's the main thrust of my objection, in addition to what I mentioned in my written submission.
Thank you very much. And be assured we have written submissions. Questions from the committee? No. Beacon and licensing. No, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. That is the end of the representations from interested parties. So we go on to representations from responsible authorities, which would be in the order of police, children, public health and community safety. Okay, over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. The Bedfordshire Police do make formal representations to the Adult Gaming Centre at 19 Silver Street, Bedford. Bedfordshire Police do have significant concerns that the granting of this licence would undermine the licensing objectives of crime and disorder. The location of 19 Silver Street is situated in an area which has experienced notable levels of antisocial behaviour, a low level of acquisitive crime, and incidents associated with vulnerable individuals who may be at risk of exploitation or involved in criminal activity. There is concern that the introduction of a 24-hour adult gaming centre may increase the existing issues and increase further opportunities for crime and disorder. The locality of surrounding, say, Silver Street already accommodates a mix of commercial premises, including late night licensed premises, as well as retail units, increasing the likelihood of vulnerable persons being drawn into harmful behaviours. The addition of a 24-hour adult gaming centre in the heart of Bedford Town Centre would likely lead to an increase in crime and disorder. And that would place further strain on our already stretched policing resources, and that would negatively impact the local community. We have produced some data from Alex Sampson, which is a Bedfordshire Police analyst. If the committee allow, we would like to present that PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
With Sergeant John Calix going to present that for you.
Thank you. So, as John has said, this been put together by one of our intel analysts, and it covers the period of April 25 up to and including the end of March 26. So whilst the data is a very specific time period, it's slightly out of date. We do recognise that at this moment in time, but it covers a 12-month period. It covers that it covers the 24-hour period as well, from obviously midnight to 23:59 hours. And just for the record, that is coming from our crime recording database, which is called Athena, as well as our incident daily management system, which is called Storm. So essentially, when you call 999, there's an incident that's created, goes through to Storm. Just for also additional clarity, if a job was to be logged onto Storm, it doesn't necessarily make it onto Athena. So there could be more jobs on one system than there is another. And also just to quantify that data as well, is that whilst there could well be incidents that are taking place that we know of, some of it may not have been reported to Bedfordshire Police by either victims or witnesses. If we can move on to slide 3, please. So slide 3 will show all the crime and ASB overview for that 12-month period. It has the Bedford all column, shows Bedford as a town specifically. And then when we reference the boundary area, what we mean is everything that is inside that highlighted boundary, all those plots in within that boundary. Silver Street is a standalone area within that document we've created, as is Midland Road. And as you can see there, with over that 12-month period, there was 60 offences of all crime and ASB specific to Silver Street. And then within that boundary area, as a whole, just over 1,800 instances of crime and ASB. Now, it's important to note that with most of those offences or most of those incidents, there will be either witnesses or victims affected by those counts of crime and ASP. And potentially not all would have been able to be attended by Bedfordshire Police, as John said, based on stretching of demand and resources, not only in Bedford, but across Bedfordshire as a whole. ASB specifically for Silver Street accounted for 2.9% of that ASB within that boundary area. Again, it's not a particularly high number. However, there is still just under 3% of ASB that has taken place within a very small area within the town centre. The heat map as well, we've done that, is worth referencing within the specific boundary area. You've got the main high street running through it from north to south, passing through that boundary. And obviously then just to the left of that, you've got 19 Silver Street, which is where the proposed 24-hour gaming centre is going to be, which is well within one of those high concentrated areas. On to slide 4, if I could, please. Thank you. So this is the breakdown in relation to crimes within that specific area. So this is now looking at crime specific, and I believe it has been referenced and mentioned already, but the those individual triangles will show some of the other gaming centres and gambling facilities that we have within the town centre. Crimes itself, broken down, violence against the person, theft offences, public order offences, drug-related offences, sexual offences, and offensive weapons. Now, certainly they're not all attributed to those gambling centres. There would be all crimes within that specific boundary area. But of concern that Bedfordshire Police have is if there is a 24-hour facility, a 24-hour facility in Bedford's town centre, there would be an increase of those types of offences. So violence against the person, public order and drugs are the probably ones that we are most concerned about, which will then continue to add to the number of offences that are being reported within the town centre. And then that additional demand for Bedfordshire Police to have to respond to. Then finally, in relation to slide 5, this just breaks down the antisocial behaviour that takes place within that boundary area. Again, that high number of just over 1,800 counts of ASB, with 60 taking place specifically within Silver Street, and as I said, it's Bedfordshire see on that map. Well within the heart of Bedford Town Centre. It does then break it down further around the area on Saturday with 64 offences, followed by Friday of 51, which we would expect, bearing in mind it's the weekend hours, and people coming into the town centre more than they do properly on a.
This is just to sum up on what we said so far. So Bedfordshire Police have raised the objection to a 24-hour adult gaming centre. And that's primarily due to the location of the intended premises, rather than the operation itself. So while having no immediate concern regarding the management, the day-to-day running of the adult gaming centre, Bedfordshire Police consider that the introduction of a 24-hour adult gaming centre in this location has the potential to contribute to existing issues and increase further operational demand on police resources impacting the local community. And that's particularly into relation to crime, disorder, and the protection of vulnerable individuals. The Bedfordshire Police therefore asked the committee to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. You might have seen that I think Councillor Bywater referenced spreadsheets that councillors get showing 2-week breakdown, and she referenced 97 crimes, which I think, I mean, I've seen these spreadsheets, I received the Goldington ones. That's not like proven and charged crimes. So you're saying maybe 60 in a year, that's 6, incidents in a year on Silver Street. How do you reflect on the comparison with 97 of these recorded whatevers, police incidents, I guess we might call them, within 2 weeks?
So there will be, it will depend on if they are a call to service.
Yeah, I think that might
As
be
a
the
result
correct
of that call to service, has there been a recorded incident? So what I mean by that is if I was a victim of a theft, for instance, along Bedford High Street, I ring the police, so we first of all record an incident, and then when we've turned up and spoken to myself as a victim, we then record that as an incident. So obviously one recorded incident to one recorded crime. It could be that we record an incident, say something's happened. However, when we go speak to whoever's involved, there's no crime that's been committed for it with that phrase, so we would record crime. So there could be some stats that aren't quite balancing up.
Yes, thank you. So there's kind of a lot more activity than shown in those figures. Did the police, you may or may not know the answer to this, did the police object to the other 24-hour gaming licenses, the two on the High Street?
I believe there was another objection, and that was a few years ago, and that was to a premises which was on the High Street with the corner of Mill Street, which is now German Doner Kebabs. So it looks like police did object to it. However, it was granted. However, the applicant never took that gaming license up, I believe.
Thank you. I just wonder if you, again, various objectors have commented on ASB. There's a reference to Home Office funding around this area and followed by Bedford Borough Council funding. And I know there was a particular police concentration in the town centre for a campaign. Do you want to say something about how you would summarise like the current state of, other than the stat? Obviously the stats tell us that, you've shown us that. Do you want to say anything further about policing of ASB, the police activity?
So the current state of play is that there is a community centre team specific for town centre, but they also covers additional wards as well. So there is a community that will have a focus on the town centre with that crime and ASB, and there's a number of operations that we've run over the years that will look at a number of factors that will cause issues in the town centre, and that will come from street drinking, from begging to exploitation. We've had things like Operation Highgate within the town that will then look to mitigate some of those issues and put some problem solving approaches in place to reduce the demand on not only us as a service, but other services, public health, mental health, for instance. There is some, there are some challenges and difficulties at the moment with police and resources. Everything that we do is very much threat harm risk based, and there will be, unfortunately, at times the need to pull community teams out of some of those areas to manage those other threat harm risk issues that are presenting. So, whilst we would like to have a presence in the town as often as we can to prevent those from taking place, and obviously prevention as well is a little bit, but that isn't always achievable.
Yeah, you've got what's like past. So it's got a knock-on effect. Any other questions from John?
So obviously in your letter of objection, you say you object to a 24-hour premises. Are you objecting per se to the premises? Are you objecting to the fact it's 24 hours?
As John said, it's not a representation against the management and running and the ownership of the business. 15 businesses, obviously across the country. There is something to be said to that. I think the concern that we have is the 24-hour nature of that business for the town centre. And I raise that because obviously we are a 24-hour organisation, and as our most of the bodies that are around the room. And is at times is that we won't have the resource and capability to respond to issues that may, I use the term, may happen at that venue. And what I don't want to happen is that if something was to happen where member of staff was badly assaulted or injured, we wouldn't necessarily have the ability to deal with that in its infancy. And we would be playing catch up to that. So it's for us, it's the 24-hour nature of that.
Yeah. So what is that? What is the time period you're really concerned about where you think you would, because if something in the best will of the world, through no fault of the management of this operation, something goes wrong, something happens to particularly a member of staff there, what are the hours, where are the hours you have the concern you may not be able to get there in a timely fashion because there is something else going on?
Yeah, demand is always a difficult one for us.
Yes.
I would love to say this time. And as we said, as we saw, unfortunately, with a few incidents recently, is time. Big weekends are probably the biggest concern for us. Certainly, as we're moving into the summer period, weekends is going to be a particular challenge. And having Friday night, Saturday night, those are the times that turn by.
Yeah. And one final one. With the proposed safeguards there, putting in place for a 24-hour operation, what are the specific concerns you have about that, other than the fact we won't have officers potentially on the ground, but which bits of that are worrying you from your, I guess, your professional capacity, that, actually it just isn't going to be enough?
I think the point around the conflict management trainings there, but the kind of the staff on site is concerned around that. And it's then that escalation process in terms of actually getting through to us to be able to respond to that.
That's all my questions.
Thanks. Anything from the applicants? No. Interested parties? Any questions? No legal and licensed?
Can I just clarify a couple of points? You say that there will be a likely increase in crime and disorder, and you mentioned resources. Obviously, the crime and disorder licensing objective under gambling is that these premises, amongst other things, would be associated with crime and disorder. You're aware of that, yeah? And so when you say not all of these are attributed to gambling premises, is there anything in the data which links the crime data that you've observed to gambling premises?
We do. There is a low number of crimes attributed to it.
Is that in the PowerPoint?
It's not in that. Do have some notes in relation to that. So obviously that wasn't put together by me. It was put together by an intel analyst that I have. I've got some notes when we sat down to discuss it. Within that notes is the complete final number of crimes related to those gambling premises for that specific time.
So what's the low number then?
I believe it was 13.
Across the year period?
Yeah, it was.
And what's the negative base?
They would be of those offences that I mentioned. So violence against the person, and theft offences were the main offences of those.
And I said related to gambling premises. Can you be any clearer? Are they on the premises or outside?
They were on.
What time were they?
They were within that 24-hour time, but I haven't got that breakdown. I can get those. I haven't got that breakdown.
Sorry, that's 13 within Silver Street, within the boundary area, within Bedford.
It would be within the boundary area where those other premises are located.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, great. I think we're on to children's services and or public. Oh, sorry.
Can I just make a clarification? On the last gambling application, the police didn't object.
Which one was that? Was that?
That was Little Vegas.
Yeah. And what year was that?
It's the Donna Kebab shop.
Oh, right, okay, no, so, yeah, right.
Okay, so it's
Yeah,
2022.
2022.
Okay. Okay, great. So the Arnold 24 hours one was granted a license before 2022. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Right, children's services and or public health.
So I will start, and it's a joint representation, and I will bring in Harmesh and Sarah. That's okay.
Yeah, great.
So I'm here today on behalf of our Director of Public Health, Vicky Head. Our objections relate to the third gambling licence objective, protecting children and other vulnerable persons from being harmed or exploited by gambling. And I will try to summarise, along with Harmesh and Sarah, why, in our professional opinions, it's not possible to adequately mitigate against negative impacts on children and other vulnerable people in this specific location, and therefore why granting the licence is not reasonably consistent with that third licensing objective. The proposed location is pivotal to our concerns. The local area is in the third most deprived decile nationally, and as we've heard, it's immediately adjacent to areas that are in our most deprived decile nationally. The area is frequented by a cohort of vulnerable adults who street drink, who experience addiction, and also sleep rough. We have evidence to show that adult gaming centres tend to be overrepresented in areas of high deprivation, and that concerning trend is perpetuated by this application. And in the context of this highly deprived local area, we have three main concerns. First, the people who are most likely to be negatively affected are children, young people, and vulnerable adults, including those with substance addiction and those who are experiencing financial hardship and poverty. And there is strong evidence to show that people from these groups are more susceptible to the harms of gambling, both the direct harms, but also the indirect harms. So, for example, family members who are affected by problem gambling in their family. Our second concern is that granting the licence would lead to increased gambling activity in an area of the town that includes these highly vulnerable populations. It includes also a number of services and charities that support people with vulnerabilities. And we have further education colleges as well, as we've heard. And third, that increasing a high concentration of gambling premises in the area will likely increase the incidence of problem gambling. Again, there's evidence to show that when you have concentration of these facilities, it facilitates more gambling and it facilitates more problem gambling. Compared to other licensed gambling premises, adult gaming centres are permitted, as we've heard, to have a higher proportion of high stakes machines. And they have been shown to have greater potential for harm than lower stakes machines. And whilst the individual stakes seem low compared to some other forms of gambling like casino tables, the electronic gaming machines are designed for repeat and continued engagement. That is the business model. We note and appreciate that the applicant has considered our representation and updated the local area risk assessment accordingly. Whilst the overall residual risk has not been changed as a result, the updated risk assessment does acknowledge a higher risk for children, young people, and vulnerable adults, and notes that this will require enhanced ongoing management, safeguarding intervention, and regular review. Hearing today from you, thank you very much for your representations. I am still concerned about the mitigation of the window displays as it relates to children and young people. I appreciate that the nature of that advertising is closely regulated, but it remains the fact that children and young people will be exposed to images of gambling machines and gambling related messages as they walk past this venue. And as we've evidenced in our report, this is a high footfall area close to the bus station. We have a lot of children transiting through the area to and from schools every day, changing buses, etc. In his presentation, Mr. Wood said that there were no concerns relating to existing venues. In our representation, we cite evidence from our council's licensing compliance officer, regarding nearby licensed premises where vulnerable individuals known to participate in begging have been witnessed gambling. I was going to now hand over briefly to Harmesh to summarise the concerns as they relate to children and young people.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, committee, for giving me the opportunity to brief, and I'll keep this fairly short. So, want to make the point that young people are more vulnerable than adults to gaming related harm due to their biological and neurological development. And research shows that children with additional vulnerabilities are more likely to be adversely influenced by exposure to gaming establishments. The proposed location, this point has already been made, but the proposed location is close to a range of services attended by children and young people, including and recently opened Central Family Hub, Bedford School. A number of children, as you probably know, go over from the college to get their lunch, etc. day. So the footfall of children and young people through the town centre is high, also due to the presence of the bus station. The daily presence of so many young people in the area is of concern, as the council's licensing compliance officers shared evidence of under 18s gambling at nearby licensed venues. There is also evidence from the community safety team of unaccompanied minors in the area during nighttime hours. Our community safety manager, Sarah Stevens, submitted supporting evidence from CCTV, and I'll now ask her to sum up.
Okay, so obviously everyone's seen the full report, so I won't read it out. But Bedford Borough CCTV control room is operated 24/7, so we have operators live monitoring footage throughout. And we've gone through all of the recorded incidents for that system, particularly to look at evidence around the vulnerable person. So we haven't entered into the space of crime and disorder, so we're not overlapping with the police data purposely so. So in that 12-month period, our CCTV operators have recorded 223 incidents over those 5 categories that we've broken the data down into in the report. And that's within that 500-metre defined area. And actually 47% of those take place between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. So that suggests really that we have an equal split of incidents in the kind of daytime, working school day and outside of those hours. We're regularly observing individuals that are known to be alcohol dependent. These are people that my community safety officers are regularly engaging with. So we are fully aware of their alcohol dependency. And we have links to concerns raised about persons who are likely, therefore, to be influenced by exposure to gambling establishments. I'd like to draw attention to the high proportion of incidents that related to young people specifically, so unaccompanied young people. And again, many of them outside of those normal school days. You made reference to the fact that there were no specific links to existing premises. I'd like to just caveat that the nature of CCTV observations mean that we're not able to attribute the previous venues that individuals may have been in prior to our interactions with them. But we do, we're concerned about the particularly high number of mental health crisis episodes that our CCTV operators observed in that 500-metre window. I'd also like to just reference, there was a reference to engaging with, community mental health services for those people who are displaying vulnerabilities, and I'd have concerns about their availability outside of those sort of standard operating hours. We work very closely with Commission Services for drug and alcohol and mental health, and I would have concerns that your staff would be able to engage with those services outside of those kind of working and education hours.
So it's our view that the risk assessment doesn't adequately anticipate or mitigate these risks to children and young people, and that evidence from nearby licensed venues indicates that it would be difficult to fully enforce the necessary protection. I also just want to pick up on the point about out of hours. So we have an out of hours emergency duty team which services 3 local authorities. If there is an incident involving a child which requires that is quite limited provision. It's effective, but it's quite limited. And I just want to make one other point. Even if children are not in those premises during those hours, their parents might be. And those parents return home and sometimes in quite distressed state. And therefore there may be incidents that we have to respond to along with our police colleagues around any potential safeguarding issues that may take place out of hours, which presents additional risk and vulnerability and pressure on already stretched resources. Thank you.
Just to sum up, A final point around the density of gambling premises in the area. We've heard already that we have 6 of the borough's 18 venues within half a kilometre. And the density in this area and the neighbouring ward is much, much higher than both the national and the borough averages. And there's evidence in our report to show that having a high density of gambling venues is associated with an increased risk of an incidence of problem gambling. So, in summary, the people most likely to be affected include those who are protected under the third licensing objective, and including adults with substance misuse issues and those living with financial hardship, as well as children and young people. Granting the license is likely to lead to increased gambling activity in an area of town with a large risk population, and increasing a high concentration of gambling premises in the area will likely increase the incidence of problem gambling. The challenges of the locality that we've heard about today are consistent, I think, with the locality that was present in the case of Royal Amusements versus Sheffield City Council. And as we've heard already, the district judge in that case found that locality was a proper consideration for the committee and that the hidden harms of gambling were relevant to the application. Our conclusion is that the risks to children, young people and vulnerable people in this location cannot be sufficiently mitigated by the proposed controls within the bounds of the premises, and therefore granting the licence is not reasonably consistent with that third licence objective.
Thank you. I have a question. So you said, Ian, that there is evidence that an increased density of gambling premises increases gambling harm. And I was just having a little look at one of those references. Is that based on data from the UK?
I think that's based on worldwide data.
Okay. Thanks.
I just want for clarification. It's not gambling premises per se you're objected to, it's the location of this particular proposed premises, because obviously there is, you know, gambling is legal in the country, yes, but it is the picked location is going to, you know, cause that, because obviously we've got an operator sat here who's got 15 premises. Some are in higher deprivation areas than Bedford, and you've not had a single license infraction or review in that time. But obviously, I don't know the full extent where there other locations are. It is the fact this is sat in such a specific area with homeless shelters nearby, with a high footfall of children, and also then with, you know, the community larders and that side of it, is the fact that in the nicest possible way, all the mitigations they're proposing to put in place is going to cause, you'll believe it's going to cause an issue if this premise is located in this particular spot. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anything from the applicants?
Should I just them to confirm your question? Worldwide data.
Yeah, are you
I
able?
don't want to. Been a few things said that I don't agree with, but what worldwide data?
It was that particular report, which is referenced in the paper, is a BMA, British Medical Association review of the evidence around gambling harms that cites a number of reports from around the world. So I don't have that specific reference in front of me. It's like an umbrella review.
It's on page 214 of them. Yeah.
Reference 12 in the report.
Reference
12, British Medical Association Board of Science 2007.
Okay,
There's a
so
hyperlink.
that's
Page 8 of our 10 of our
page 217 of the PDF. BMA. Security check
Yeah.
required.
Might even.
Evans is behind a paywall. Sue's broken the paywall. But okay, I'm not sure about that. I mean, it says in the NHS. Yeah, that's the title. Where their data sets come from.
Right.
Sorry. Are you flicking through it, Ian?
I am flicking through it, but
The paper, yeah.
my question would be whether that point is going to be material to your decision.
Yes, yes, it was, yeah. Okay, any other questions?
Not if the answer is it comes from a BMA Board of Science 2007 paper that
That's
we haven't seen.
Yes.
Oh, the answer is yes.
Yes, so it is the gambling addiction, its treatment within the NHS, the guide for healthcare professionals, January 2007.
Is that document within the actual document?
There's there's a link to it.
Okay.
It's referenced.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any questions from interested parties, legal and licensing?
Can I just check? You mentioned evidence of under 18s at nearby gambling venues.
Yeah.
I saw a reference in the report to council officers. I'm looking at page 216 of the PDF. Council officers have shared evidence of under 18s engaged in gambling at a nearby licensed venue. Is that the evidence that we have?
That's it's the report of the officer to me.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have,
Do we know whether that's a betting premises or an AGC?
Not an AGC.
And it's an individual premises?
Yes, that's correct.
And was it one occasion or more?
I believe it was one specific occasion.
Was action taken?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, that was addressed in the moment. I don't know what action there was subsequent to that.
Thanks.
Okay, so are we ready for the applicants? Someone? 10.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Okay, so I will try and be brief, I promise. So three
Take the time you need.
three main points to sum it up. The first, of course, is the law, and you have Mr. Ranatunga, you have my case summary. But just for the purpose of the hearing, it is important to be aware of the exact wording of, for start, the licensing objectives. Because licensing objective 1 is preventing gambling, the actual gambling itself, from being a source of crime or disorder, being associated with crime or disorder, or being used to support crime. So that is specific to the actual gambling, which is very different to the antisocial behaviour objective in pubs and clubs, where it might be general. So we're not looking at antisocial behaviour or crime and disorder generally. Under this objective, you are looking at whether gambling at this premises will be a source of crime or disorder. The second one is ensuring gambling is conducted in a fair and open way. I don't think that's an issue. And the third one is the protection of children and other vulnerable persons from being harmed. And as you will be aware, and again, it's not everybody's cup of tea, section 153 requires you to aim to permit, but the wording is, again, very clear. In accordance with the codes of practice, that's not really been brought up, in accordance with the relevant guidance issued by the Gambling Commission, reasonably consistent with the licensing objectives. So is this application made by Future Leisure Limited reasonably consistent with the licensing objectives? Do Future Leisure Limited reasonably prevent gambling from being a source of crime or disorder, protect children or other vulnerable persons, etc. And the final one is in accordance with your statement of gambling policy, which is often a starting point for applications of this nature. And I do reiterate, this is a fairly recent policy, January 2025. It will have been implemented after consultation. And the conclusion of this policy is that you have no particularly problematic areas for gambling. That's what the policy says. So in accordance with your policy, the starting point is you don't have particularly problematic areas for gambling and you don't list them. So again, whilst applicants, and you forgive me for doing so, will use the specific wording of the Act when making applications, as you will be advised by Mr. Ranatunga, it is specific in various parts of it as to how you should approach the law. And again, I readily accept that everybody might not agree with that. So there's been a bit of, there's reference to a Sheffield case and reference to a Haringey case. Mr. Ranatunga will advise you that neither of those cases are binding anyway, because they're both magistrates' court decisions. They're both made on the evidence in each case. I think it is reasonable for me, however, to refer you to the judge's findings about this company, although actually none of his findings have been challenged by everybody or anybody, particularly around this table, about what this company does. So when the judge says the applicant is steeped in the business, written and oral evidence deals extensively with knowledge, understanding, procedures, no issues at any of the other adult gaming centres in London 24/7, no issues about complaints of behaviour, staff are clearly well trained, there is no evidence that any premises have not been promoting the licensing objectives. That is the finding of the judge after a hearing, but it is also my submissions to you today that those you can make on the evidence those findings. And the police have said we don't have any concerns about management of the venue. And my submission is to you is that you haven't had a single piece of evidence that would invite you to find anything else about the way in which this company will promote the licensing objectives. The evidence from this side of the table has been clear that staff are well trained. We don't have issues undermining the licensing objectives. We understand training, we understand how to look after staff, we carry out interactions, we protect the vulnerable. And it is not submitted to you by anybody in fairly extensive and well-made representations that is not the case. And it goes a little bit further in terms of the gambling in Bedford at the moment. You have two other machine-based shops, which I actually think are bingo licenses and not adult gaming centre licenses, but they're the same. I never really understand why one applies to one and one applies. They're machine-based shops, so I'm not making a point of that. They operate 24/7, and we haven't, as far as I noted, heard any evidence that any of these issues or concerns arise at those premises. So you have evidence that the applicant promotes the licensing objectives. You have no evidence that machine-based shops in Bedford do not promote the licensing objectives. And I suppose we then, the other argument would be the exact location of this site, but the other two machine shops, I think, are all within the boundary that the police referred to. They're obviously in a slightly different part of the town centre, but there is no link in any evidence between machine-based shops and any of the concerns that have been raised by those who make objections. In terms of the antisocial behaviour side, there may be and is antisocial behaviour in the area. It's not linked to gambling. It's not linked to an association with gambling. I think there was reference to one instance of vulnerability. It's a betting shop. There is a low number of the police have said, which I don't think unfortunately was in the original rep, but I was happy that the question was asked. There may be a low number recorded elsewhere, but no evidence that any ASB is connected to gambling in the machine-based shops, and there is a real difference between the betting shops and the machine-based shops, such as the two Mercer sites. So just because there is ASB in the area, that doesn't mean, and you have no evidence to suggest that a future leisure shop will add to it, just as if a new Tesco opened or WH Smith. There is no evidence to link this application to antisocial behaviour. The local area risk assessment, not much left to sum up on. The local area risk assessment, without a shadow of doubt, is incredibly detailed. And the key to it, and local area risk assessments often get discussed at length, the key to it is that it needs to identify issues. And Anna has identified the issues in the area. Is there one place or facility that she may have missed? That may well be the case. But the issues have been identified, the risks have been assessed, and that's always subjective as to how high you categorise a risk. And Anna has then put in place, said, oh, these are all the measures we'll have in place in 150, however many pages it is. That's not just a standard operation, that's an incredibly detailed local area risk assessment with all the measures in place. And the easy point against that is made, well, doesn't really do enough, doesn't have every measure in place, but nobody has sat there and said, why don't you do this, or why don't you do that? Because that might be a point that we would consider and we may do. There was a question about SIA, which we will assess. And in fact, listening to the police, and the application is for 24/7. That's a matter for you to determine on the evidence. We say that we operate 24/7 without problems, and therefore you can grant that. We say we will risk assess SIA. If you are minded to consider 24/7, Ben has just mentioned, listening to the police, that we would happily commit to a condition that we have an SIA door supervisor between, let's say, 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. So we would have 2 members of staff, and we would have an SIA doorman on site, having listened to the police concerns with regard to the 24-hour nature of the business. The vulnerability point, which is a point very well made, refers to the deprivation in the area. We've submitted evidence that we operate in, this isn't trying to score points at all, but we operate in areas similar, if not worse, and we don't have issues. We operate in areas where there are children's facilities. We operate in areas where there may be homelessness. Some of the areas we operate in have these issues in them, and we operate there without issue. We are audited by the Gambling Commission. We have no issues raised, and I appreciate that puts us in a slightly different position, because I can say to you the evidence is we understand all of these points. All of these points are in other areas, and we do put measures in place to make sure that the vulnerable are protected. And it's slightly unfair to suggest that we assume that our measures guarantee optimum success. That's a little bit unfair, but actually we don't assume it. We know, because we've been doing it in other areas. And this locality, the two Merkur sites are in the town centre. This locality has its challenges that has been referred to and has been acknowledged by Anna. But we say that the two Merkurs, the two machine-based shops, nobody suggests that they don't do their job, even if they're in a slightly different part of town. And that with all of the measures that we have in place, we will promote the licensing objectives and we will ensure that the vulnerable are protected. You know, young people will not get into this shop. Anybody who has potential issues will not be allowed to gamble. And yes, if you mathematically work out how fast you can play a machine by spinning it, that's the same in every adult gaming centre in the premises. It's a point well made, but that requires the staff to interact with the customers. And as Anna and Ben have said, that's what we'll do. So if somebody is there every 3 seconds doing that, that in itself would be a point at which the staff would be trained to go and speak to the person who is playing it. So the rest of the points I think are in my case summary. As I know you will with Mr. Ranatunga here, I would ask you to apply the law specifically. The evidence that I say is that our measures do work in other shops in very similar, if not more challenging environments. The evidence is that there is no evidence that the two machine shops in Bedford cause any of these problems. I don't think people objected to the Little Vegas one, although that didn't happen. Cumulative impact is a licensing act alcohol matter. Now is not the time to debate some of these points which are fairly quoted in the public health rep. I don't accept that just opening another shop is going to mean there will be more problems, and I don't accept that's the test anyway. And you've had my submissions on this. Do you find that Future Leisure Limited, with their experience and everything you've heard, will be reasonably consistent with the licensing objectives and promote those licensing objectives in this shop in terms of gambling? And I would hope on the evidence that you accept they do. And can I end by saying clearly there is a strong public view about these types of premises. If you are minded to grant in whatever shape, then we would like to assure you that we will liaise with the police and those who have made representation, whether that's inviting any comments every 6 months or whatever, or having a meeting. We don't, if we are fortunate and if we are granted, we don't want to come here and then shut the door. That's not how this company works. If you do grant, then we will liaise, and if there are issues, we will work with the local people and work them out. I think I would now be repeating myself. It's all in my summary and in the evidence that we've submitted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think we are at the stage to draw the public hearing to a close. So thank you everyone for attendance. So thanks to everyone. So I have to ask you now to leave the hearing, apart from councillors, democratic services and the subcommittee's legal advisors, Mr. Simon, Mr. Ranatunga. As mentioned, the decision notice will be available on the council's website within 5 working days of this hearing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
She said how we should stop streaming.
Yeah.
Streaming at the end. Ellie, I'll stop streaming.
Okay. That was your answer.
Yeah.